I've worked the night shift as a 911 operator in our small town for more than a decade, and in all that time, I've heard just about everything. Drunk fights that spill out into the street. Lonely old folks calling because they don't want to feel forgotten. Even kids dialing in on dares, giggling before they hang up. But there are a few calls that never leave me. They stay like a splinter under the skin, buried deep, impossible to dig out. The first time I heard her voice, it was just past 2 in the morning. I remember it because the room was so still. The dispatch office is always quiet at that hour. Just the faint hum of fluorescent lights overhead, the soft buzz of equipment that never powers down. You start to notice every small sound when you've been sitting there long enough. The ticking of the clock feels louder than the calls themselves. Then the phone lit up. Line 2. I answered like I always do, steady and professional, though my voice was a little rough from too much coffee. I'm Wen. What's your emergency? There was a pause at first. I almost thought the line was empty. But then finally I heard a voice, soft, shaky, and younger than I expected. Hi. I need help, please. It was a girl. Maybe early 20s, maybe even younger. Her voice cracked in a way that made me picture someone clutching a phone too tight. Knuckles white, heart racing. I straightened in my chair. Okay, you've reached 911. I'm here to help you. Can you tell me what's going on? She sucked in a breath. I'm on the side of the highway. My car broke down and I don't know where I am. It's so dark out here. I can't... Her words stumbled, like she was struggling to catch them before they slipped away. I tried to keep my voice calm. That's okay. You're safe talking to me. Can you tell me your name? Another pause. The sound of wind rushed through the phone, muffled by her hand trying to cover the receiver. Finally, she whispered, Emily. All right, Emily. I'm going to help you. Look around. Do you see any landmarks? A mile marker, a sign, anything like that? I typed quickly into the system, flagging the call as a stranded motorist, possible distress. But she didn't answer me right away. I could hear the nervous shuffle of her shoes on gravel. Then she spoke again, her voice low. There was a man? He stopped earlier. He said he could give me a ride, but I didn't go. I didn't trust him. He looked at me weird, like he knew me. My throat went dry. I glanced at the clock. 2:08 a.m. Out on those rural stretches of highway, there's nothing but cornfields, broken fences, and the endless dark. Hardly any traffic at all. You did the right thing, I told her, trying to sound steady. You're smart to stay where you are. Do you feel safe right now? Do you see anyone nearby? She hesitated. And then I heard her breathe out, shaky and uneven. I think he's still out here. Something in my stomach dropped. I turned my chair toward the nearest deputy's desk, though the office was empty. No one but me on this shift. I hit the button to patch her call through to the county sheriff's line, but I kept talking to her, kept my voice level. Emily, listen to me. Stay calm. I'm sending someone to you. Can you see his vehicle? Headlights, anything? There was a rustle like she was ducking down low, hiding. He turned his lights off, she whispered. My fingers froze over the keyboard. Emily, are you in your car right now? Another pause. No, my car died. I tried the engine, but it won't start. I'm standing by the ditch. I thought maybe it would be safer if I wasn't in the open, but the line broke into static for half a second, making me wince. I tried again. Emily, can you hear me? Stay on the line. Don't hang up. Her breathing came faster now, uneven, frightened. He's walking, she said suddenly. He's walking down the road. I can hear his boots. He knows I'm here. I swear my own pulse jumped into my throat. I waved a hand over the console, trying to get an exact location from the system, but it wasn't pinging right. The signal was weak, almost fragmented. Emily, listen very carefully. I need you to stay quiet. Stay as still as you can. Help is coming. I just need a landmark. Anything you can see. For a moment there was nothing but wind and her rapid breaths. Then, in a voice that barely carried, she whispered, There's an old sign. It says, County Road 6. It's falling over. I typed it in, relief hitting me for just a second. I knew that stretch. Barely any houses. Just miles of dark farmland and that leaning green sign at the intersection. I relayed it to the sheriff's office. They said they'd dispatch a unit immediately. Emily, good job. I know where you are. Someone's coming, all right? "You're not alone." But she didn't answer right away. Instead, I heard something else, a faint crunching noise close to the phone. Footsteps in gravel. Then her voice, sharper now. "He's here." "Oh my God, he's—" The call cut out, just a hard click, followed by the dead hum of the line. I sat frozen with the receiver pressed to my ear, listening to nothing. Absolutely nothing. I tried calling back immediately. The signal wouldn't go through. That happens sometimes out there. Those back roads are notorious for dropping calls. But something about the silence felt heavier. Deliberate. Like more than a technical glitch. I tried again and again. Each time met with static, then emptiness. Finally, I had no choice but to sit back and wait, staring at the console, waiting for the deputy's radio to confirm. But as the minutes crawled by, I kept hearing her voice in my head. The way she whispered my ear full of fear. The way the sound of her breathing carried over the static. The way she said, "He knows I'm here." The sheriff's office finally radioed in. The deputy had driven the stretch of County Road 6. He found the leaning sign, just like she'd said. He found an old sedan pulled off into the grass. The hood up. Lights off, but no trace of Emily. The car door was left open. Keys still in the ignition. No sign of a man on the road either. It was like both of them had vanished into the night. I didn't go home when my shift ended. I stayed in that chair until the sun came up, waiting for the phone to ring again, but it didn't. And that's the part that haunts me most, because in this job you expect resolution. You expect an officer to come back with a report, a name, an ending, but with Emily there was none. Just a voice that disappeared mid-sentence. And in the weeks that followed, when I tried to follow up, I learned something else. There was no missing persons report filed for her. No one named Emily with that description reported missing anywhere in the county. It was like she had never existed, but I know she did, because I can still hear her breathing in the static. Every time the line goes quiet, I've worked the night shift as a 911 operator in our small town for more than a decade, and in all that time, I've heard just about everything. Drunk fights that spill out into the street. Lonely old folks calling because they don't want to feel forgotten. Even kids dialing in on dares, giggling before they hang up. But there are a few calls that never leave me. They stay like a splinter under the skin, buried deep, impossible to dig out. The first time I heard her voice, it was just past 2 in the morning. I remember it because the room was so still. The dispatch office is always quiet at that hour. Just the faint hum of fluorescent lights overhead, the soft buzz of equipment that never powers down. You start to notice every small sound when you've been sitting there long enough. The ticking of the clock feels louder than the calls themselves. Then the phone lit up. Line 2. I answered like I always do, steady and professional, though my voice was a little rough from too much coffee. "I'm Wen. What's your emergency?" There was a pause at first. I almost thought the line was empty. But then finally I heard a voice, soft, shaky, and younger than I expected. Hi, I need help, please." It was a girl, maybe early 20s, maybe even younger. Her voice cracked in a way that made me picture someone clutching a phone too tight, knuckles white, heart racing. I straightened in my chair. "Okay, you've reached 911. I'm here to help you. Can you tell me what's going on?" She sucked in a breath. "I'm on the side of the highway. My car broke down and I don't know where I am. It's so dark out here. I can't—" Her words stumbled, like she was struggling to catch them before they slipped away. I tried to keep my voice calm. "That's okay. You're safe talking to me. Can you tell me your name?" Another pause. The sound of wind rushed through the phone, muffled by her hand trying to cover the receiver. Finally, she whispered, "Emily." "All right, Emily. I'm going to help you. Look around. Do you see any landmarks? A mile marker, a sign, anything like that?" I typed quickly into the system, flagging the call as a stranded motorist, possible distress. But she didn't answer me right away. I could hear the nervous shuffle of her shoes on gravel. Then she spoke again, her voice low. There was a man." He stopped earlier. "He said he could give me a ride, but I didn't go. I didn't trust him. He looked at me weird, like he knew me." My throat went dry. I glanced at the clock. 2:08 a.m. Out on those rural stretches of highway, there's nothing but cornfields, broken fences, and the endless dark. Hardly any traffic at all. You did the right thing, I told her, trying to sound steady. You're smart to stay where you are. Do you feel safe right now? Do you see anyone nearby? She hesitated. And then I heard her breathe out, shaky and uneven. I think he's still out here. Something in my stomach dropped. I turned my chair toward the nearest deputy's desk, though the office was empty. No one but me on this shift. I hit the button to patch her call through to the county sheriff's line, but I kept talking to her, kept my voice level. Emily, listen to me. Stay calm. I'm sending someone to you. Can you see his vehicle? Headlights, anything? There was a rustle, like she was ducking down low, hiding. He turned his lights off, she whispered. My fingers froze over the keyboard. Emily, are you in your car right now? Another pause. No, my car died. I tried the engine, but it won't start. I'm standing by the ditch. I thought maybe it would be safer if I wasn't in the open, but the line broke into static for half a second, making me wince. I tried again. Emily, can you hear me? Stay on the line. Don't hang up. Her breathing came faster now, uneven, frightened. He's walking, she said suddenly. He's walking down the road. I can hear his boots. He knows I'm here. I swear my own pulse jumped into my throat. I waved a hand over the console, trying to get an exact location from the system, but it wasn't pinging right. The signal was weak, almost fragmented. Emily, listen very carefully. I need you to stay quiet. Stay as still as you can. Help is coming. I just need a landmark, anything you can see. For a moment, there was nothing but wind and her rapid breaths. Then, in a voice that barely carried, she whispered, There's an old sign. It says, County Road 6. It's falling over. I typed it in, relief hitting me for just a second. I knew that stretch. Barely any houses. Just miles of dark farmland and that leaning green sign at the intersection. I relayed it to the sheriff's office. They said they'd dispatch a unit immediately. Emily, good job. I know where you are. Someone's coming, all right? You're not alone. But she didn't answer right away. Instead, I heard something else. A faint crunching noise close to the phone. Footsteps in gravel, then her voice sharper now. He's here. Oh my God, The call cut out. Just a hard click, followed by the dead hum of the line. I sat frozen with the receiver pressed to my ear, listening to nothing, absolutely nothing. I tried calling back immediately. The signal wouldn't go through. That happens sometimes out there. Those back roads are notorious for dropping calls. But something about the silence felt heavier, deliberate, like more than a technical glitch. I tried again and again. Each time met with static, then emptiness. Finally, I had no choice but to sit back and wait, staring at the console, waiting for the deputy's radio to confirm. But as the minutes crawled by, I kept hearing her voice in my head. The way she whispered my ear full of fear. The way the sound of her breathing carried over the static. The way she said, He knows I'm here. The sheriff's office finally radioed in. The deputy had driven the stretch of County Road 6. He found the leaning sign, just like she'd said. He found an old sedan pulled off into the grass. The hood up, lights off, but no trace of Emily. The car door was left open. Keys still in the ignition. No sign of a man on the road either. It was like both of them had vanished into the night. I didn't go home when my shift ended. I stayed in that chair until the sun came up, waiting for the phone to ring again. But it didn't. And that's the part that haunts me most. Because in this job, you expect resolution. You expect an officer to come back with a report, a name, an ending. But with Emily, there was none. Just a voice that disappeared mid-sentence. And in the weeks that followed, when I tried to follow up, I learned something else. There was no missing persons report filed for her. No one named Emily with that description reported missing anywhere in the county. It was like she had never existed. But I know she did, because I can still hear her breathing in the static every time the line goes quiet. When you work this job long enough, you learn that some calls never leave you. They stick to your memory like smoke. You think you can breathe clean air again, but deep down, you know it's still in your lungs. Emily's call was like that. I couldn't shake it. Days turned into weeks, and I still found myself replaying the sound of her voice, the way she whispered into the phone, the fear heavy in her breath. The deputies had filed their report. Vehicle located. No driver present, no further evidence. Case left open, then quietly shelved. But for me, it never felt finished. Every night I sat in that same chair, headset pressed to my ear, waiting for the line to flicker alive with her again. It was 2 weeks later when something strange happened. The call came in just after midnight. A man's voice this time. Deep, gruff, worn from years of cigarettes and diesel. Yeah, I don't know if I should be calling this in, but I saw something out on County Road 6. The mention of that road made my skin prickle. I sat up straighter. Okay, sir. Tell me what you saw. He cleared his throat, and I could hear the low rumble of an engine in the background like he was still idling somewhere on the shoulder. I drive long haul. Been doing this 30 years. Last night, around 2, I was heading east and I spotted a girl walking. She was on the side of the highway near the bend past that broken-down sign. My stomach clenched. What did she look like? I asked carefully, pen already poised above the notepad even though everything would go into the system. He paused for a moment. Young, early 20s maybe, long hair. She was wearing a light-colored jacket, kind of torn up. She had her arms wrapped around herself like she was freezing. I swallowed hard. Did you speak to her? He hesitated. Yeah. I slowed the rig, rolled down the passenger window, asked if she was okay. She just looked at me. I could almost hear him shaking his head on the other end. It was the strangest thing. Her lips moved like she was trying to say something, but I couldn't hear a word. Not over the wind, and then she smiled at me. I gripped the edge of the desk. What happened after that? She kept walking, right past my truck. Didn't even glance back, just kept moving into the dark. His voice faltered. For the first time since he'd called, I heard something unsettled in it. I checked my mirrors. Swear to God, dispatcher, I checked. But she was gone. Vanished. I even pulled over up the road, left the hazards on, walked back a ways with a flashlight. Nothing. No tracks. No sound, no girl. I wrote every word down, but my hand trembled. Sir, can you tell me your name? Mike, he said after a moment. Mike Heller, out of Wichita. All right, Mike. Did you report this to anyone else? He gave a low chuckle, dry and uneasy. Lady, you think I want to be the trucker who calls in a ghost sighting? No thanks, I wasn't even going to call you, but it's been eating at me all day. She looked so real. She looked like she needed help. I stayed quiet, letting his words hang there, because in my head, I already knew who he'd seen. Emily. I thanked him. Took down his plate number, filed the call officially. On paper, it was logged as a possible sighting of a stranded pedestrian. Nothing more, but deep down I knew better. Later that week, I asked around the office about Mike Heller. One of the deputies said he'd driven through town again, stopped at a diner on the edge of the highway. The waitress swore he'd asked if anyone around here had gone missing. Said he looked pale, like he hadn't slept since. I thought maybe I'd leave it at that. But then another detail came through, and it made the whole thing worse. When I pulled up Emily's call record again, something struck me. She'd mentioned a man stopping earlier, a man who offered her a ride. She said she didn't trust him. What if it was him? What if Mike Heller wasn't telling me the full truth? The thought gnawed at me. I went back over the tape of her call, the one that cut off mid-sentence. I listened to it again and again, headphones pressed tight. And in those last few seconds, right before the line went dead, I swore I heard it. Not just Emily's voice, a lower one. Male. It was faint, buried under static, almost like a mutter. But it was there. I couldn't make out the words, but the sound of it raised goosebumps on my arms. When I tried to bring it up to the sheriff, he brushed me off. Could have been interference, he said. These lines crackle all the time. Don't overthink it. But I couldn't stop overthinking, because if Mike really was the man who stopped that night, then his story didn't add up. He said he saw her smile. He said she vanished, but the Emily I heard on the line was terrified. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't calm. She was panicking. She was whispering that someone was coming for her. So why would she smile at him? Why would she look peaceful walking into the dark? Unless it wasn't Emily anymore. Unless by the time Mike saw her, something else was already wearing her face. I've never told anyone that theory. Not out loud. But I've thought about it a lot. Especially on nights when the lines go quiet and the office feels too empty. Sometimes in that silence, I think about Mike's voice. The unease that crept into it when he told me she smiled. And I wonder if maybe, when he looked into her face that night, he saw something more than a lost girl. Maybe that's why he called me after all. Not to report a missing hitchhiker, but because deep down, he knew what he'd seen was wrong. Something that didn't belong on that road. Something that didn't belong in our world at all. It's been years since that night, but I still can't drive down County Road 6 without my chest tightening. Most people in town don't even remember the case anymore. They forget fast. They move on, but I can't. Because some nights, when the lines are quiet and the office feels too still, I still hear her. It doesn't come like a normal call. There's no ring, no flashing light on the console. It slips in through the static like a voice caught between frequencies. At first, I thought it was my mind playing tricks on me. Grief, exhaustion, too many sleepless nights. But then I heard it clear as day. Emily, her voice breaking. Words cutting in and out like they were being dragged through water. Help. He's the same half sentence. The same crack of panic. Every time it happens, my body reacts before my brain does. I sit up straight, heart pounding, hand gripping the receiver. I answer anyway, even when I know there's no line open. 911, what's your emergency? But it's never an emergency. It's never anything new. Just the same broken loop. And yet, sometimes it changes. That's the part I don't tell anyone. A few months ago, I was covering a double shift. Around 3 a.m., the static came through again. Her voice, thin and distorted, spilled into my headset. But this time, she said something different. She said my name. Not just help. Not just the fragments I'd memorized over the years. She whispered my name. My blood ran cold. I hadn't given her my name that night. Operators never do. But there it was, carried on the faint crackle of dead air. I ripped the headset off and sat in silence, my ears ringing, my hands shaking so badly I could hardly type. For a long time, I thought maybe I was cracking under the weight of it, that my brain had finally gone too far, stitching her words into sounds that weren't really there. But then it happened again, and again, sometimes in the dispatch room, sometimes in my own home, late at night when I turned the TV volume low and the static hissed between channels. I'd hear her just under the noise. Always broken, always faint, but unmistakably her. It wasn't just me, though. One night, a rookie operator was working the desk beside me. He frowned, tugged off his headset, and said, "Did you hear that?" My stomach clenched. "Hear what?" I swear I heard a woman's voice. She was saying something. Like she was trying to get through. I tried to play it off, told him it was just interference. But deep down, I knew. Emily was bleeding through again. Reaching. I've gone back to that stretch of highway more than once. Off duty, alone, sitting in my car with the engine off, just staring at that leaning County Road 6 sign. I've parked by the ditch where they found her car. I've stood in the silence, listening to the wind cut across the fields. And I swear, there's something about that place. The air feels heavier there, colder, even in summer. Like the road remembers what happened, and it doesn't want to let go. Locals say strange things about that stretch. Stories of other motorists breaking down, their engines dying without warning. Stories of people seeing a girl on the roadside, only for her to vanish when they get closer. They laugh when they tell it, chalk it up to ghost tales. But I don't laugh, because I know her name. I know the sound of her voice. I remember the exact moment the line went dead, and I remember the silence that followed. I keep telling myself I should let it go. I should chalk it up to an unsolved case, a tragedy swallowed by time. But there's something inside me that won't stop tugging. Something that whispers this isn't over. Sometimes, late at night, I dream I'm the one standing out there on the roadside. My car dead, my phone pressed to my ear. I can feel the gravel under my shoes, the ditch at my back. I can hear footsteps crunching closer. And in the dream, when I turn to look, I don't see a man at all. I see myself, standing in the dark, smiling. That's when I wake up, heart racing, drenched in sweat. People like to think this job makes you stronger. That after years of answering emergencies, you get numb to the worst parts of life. But that's not true. Some things don't harden you. They carve into you. They leave cracks that never close. For me, that crack has a name. Emily. Every time I put on my headset, I wonder if tonight will be the night her voice comes through again. And sometimes, I wonder if that's the point. Maybe she isn't asking for help anymore. Maybe she's calling me because she wants company. Maybe the road doesn't just remember her. Maybe it remembers me too. And maybe one night soon, it's going to make sure we meet face to face. The hardest part of working nights isn't the fatigue. It isn't the stale coffee or the hum of the fluorescent lights that never shut off. It's the silence. When the clock crawls past midnight and the calls stop for a while, the silence starts to feel alive. It presses down on you, heavy like the air before a storm. I've always hated that stillness more than the emergencies themselves. Because emergencies at least give you something to do, silence makes you wait. That's when the strange calls began. The first time it happened, I thought it was a prank. The line lit up, I answered in my usual voice. Calm, steady, the one I've practiced for years. When? What's your emergency? Nothing. Just faint static on the line. I almost hung up, but then I heard it. Breathing, slow, steady, too close to the receiver. I sat there for a long moment, headset pressed to my ear, waiting. Hello, can you hear me? If you need help, say something. The breathing didn't change. No words. Just the sound of air moving in and out of lungs. I stayed on the line for over a minute before the call disconnected. I logged it as possible misdial. That's what we always do. But the next night, it happened again. Same thing. No words, just that faint measured breathing. And then again the night after, always around the same time, between 2 and 3 in the morning. Always the same quiet, almost thoughtful sound of someone listening on the other end. By the 4th night, it was under my skin. I told myself it could be some lonely person who didn't know who else to call. Maybe someone with dementia or someone playing a cruel joke. But deep down, it didn't feel like that. It felt deliberate, like whoever it was wanted me to know they were there. I tried different tactics. I spoke calmly, reassuringly, like I would with a scared child. No response. I got firm, even angry once, telling them prank calls to emergency lines were illegal. Still nothing. Just that faint hiss of breathing. Sometimes I thought I could hear the rhythm of it change. Like they were reacting to me. If I raised my voice, the breath would catch for half a second, then steady again. If I went silent, theirs seemed to grow louder, filling the void I left. One night, I decided to keep them on the line as long as I could, see if it traced back anywhere. I waited, eyes flicking to the system display, but the call log showed nothing useful, untraceable. It was like the line didn't exist at all. That's when the dread really set in, because calls don't just appear out of nowhere. They have to come from somewhere, a number, a tower, something. But these calls had nothing. Just dead air. I started to dread that time of night. I'd sit at the desk, staring at the phone, waiting for the light to flicker on. Sometimes I'd imagine I could hear the breathing even before it did. The worst part wasn't the silence. It was the thought that someone was on the other end, watching the minutes tick by, choosing exactly when to call, and maybe choosing when not to. One night, after weeks of this, I tried something different. I didn't say my usual script. I just picked up the line and whispered, "Why are you calling me?" The breathing slowed. Long inhales, long exhales, like whoever it was wanted me to know they'd heard me. I felt my stomach twist. My hand shook on the desk. Then, for the first time, they exhaled harder, a sound closer to a sigh, almost like disappointment. The line cut off right after that. I stared at the console for a long time, the hum of the equipment filling the room, trying to convince myself it was just someone messing with me. But it didn't feel like a joke. It felt personal, and I started to notice something else. It wasn't always when I was on shift. One Saturday, I was off. I stayed home, sat on the couch, half asleep with the TV buzzing in the background. The phone rang. Not my cell, my landline, the one I almost never use. I picked it up. Silence, and then breathing. I froze, blood draining out of my face. I sat there clutching the receiver like it might bite me. "Hello?" My voice came out thin. The breathing continued, steady and calm. Just like at work, I slammed the phone down and unplugged it from the wall. After that, I didn't sleep much. Every time I closed my eyes, I swore I could hear it again. The slow, deliberate breath just behind my ear. The calls at work haven't stopped. They still come, always between 2 and 3 in the morning, always the same pattern. And each time, I wonder the same thing. Are they calling me because they need something, or because they're waiting for me to break? I don't know which scares me more. I used to think silence was peaceful. That's why I chose night shifts in the first place. The world slows down after midnight. No traffic, no chatter, no noise. Just quiet. But now I know there's a difference between quiet and silence. Quiet is soft, calming, like a blanket. But silence, the kind I hear now, it isn't empty. It has weight. It presses down on you. It makes your ears ring. And it follows you, even when the headset comes off. After the breathing calls started showing up at home, I couldn't relax anymore. Every night I went back to work half dreading, half expecting the line to light up again. And it always did. Always the same. No words. Just that deliberate breathing. But what unsettled me most was what came after. When my shift ended, the silence followed me. It began slowly. I'd come home and sit on the couch, the TV buzzing in the background, and yet I'd hear it. A low hiss in the room, like the faint trace of static. I'd mute the television, but the sound would still be there. Not loud, just present. At first I told myself it was ringing in my ears, maybe stress. But then it grew sharper, clearer. And sometimes, God, I hated this part. It almost sounded like breathing, not constant, not like the calls. Just small interruptions in the silence. A drawn-out inhale behind me when I walked into a room. A short, measured exhale when I turned out the lights. I'd whip around, heart pounding, expecting to find someone standing there. But there was never anyone. Just empty space, humming with that invisible weight. It followed me to bed, too. I'd lie there in the dark, covers pulled to my chin, and the room would feel wrong. Too still, too watchful. My own breathing would echo back at me, doubled, like someone was lying right beside me. Breathing in sync, then falling out of sync. Then waiting. I started sleeping with the lights on. It didn't help. One night, I woke up at 3:07 in the morning. My throat was dry, my skin clammy. I sat up in bed and listened. The silence was thick, and then, there it was. A slow inhale, too far away to be mine, but close enough to feel in my chest. I froze. My body refused to move. My ears strained against the dark, chasing the sound. It stopped. I told myself it was nothing, that I'd imagined it. But as I swung my legs off the bed, I heard the floor creak. Not from me. From the hallway, my breath caught. The house felt suddenly unfamiliar, like the walls had shifted overnight. I sat there, motionless, for what felt like an hour, until the silence pressed so hard against me that I had to break it. Hello? My voice cracked. No response. I grabbed the nearest thing I could, a flashlight from my nightstand, and forced myself into the hall. Every step echoed louder than it should have. The silence didn't retreat. It seemed to grow with me, stretching down the hallway deeper into the house. I checked every room. Locked windows, closed doors. Nothing. But the silence stayed. It stayed in the corners of the living room. It stayed in the bathroom mirror. It stayed pressed against my ears, whispering without words. By morning, I was trembling. I hadn't slept. I went to work exhausted, half hoping the phone would ring just so I could hear something other than the silence. And of course it did. 41 a.m. The line lit up. I answered. The breathing was there, steady, patient. But this time, I didn't speak. I just held the line. 30 seconds passed. A minute. My heart hammered in my chest. Then the breathing slowed. Long inhales, long exhales, matching the rhythm I'd heard in my bedroom. My stomach dropped, because for the first time, I knew. It wasn't just the silence following me home, it was them, whoever they were. Whatever they weren't just on the line anymore. They were here. That night, I didn't log the call. I just sat in the dark until my shift ended, staring at the wall, the silence pressing down on me like a hand over my mouth. The silence hasn't left since, even now. As I sit here speaking these words, it hangs in the air, heavy, waiting, and if I stop talking, I know I'll hear it again, that faint, steady breathing, not in the headset, not on the line, but right here, inside my home. I still remember the sound of that boy's voice. It cut through the quiet of the dispatch room like a knife. I'd been working nights for a while by then. You get used to strange calls. People who are drunk, lonely, scared. Calls that turn out to be nothing, or worse, something you can't fix. But the voice of a child, that never fades into the background. The call came in at 1:12 a.m. A landline number from outside of town, way out in the farming country. I answered like always. 111, what's your emergency? The line was full of static at first, then a burst of sobbing, sharp and raw. A boy's voice, high and panicked. Please, please help! It's in the barn! I sat up straighter, my whole body on alert. Okay, slow down. Who am I speaking with? His breath hitched. I'm Jacob. Please, it's in the barn. His words broke apart into a scream. Not the kind you hear when a kid scrapes their knee. This was full of terror, torn straight from his lungs. Jacob, listen to me, I said quickly. Are you with your parents? Where are they? There was fumbling on the line like he was clutching the receiver too tight. They're not here. They went into town. I was supposed to be asleep, but I heard it. It was scratching, and then the cows. They're screaming. He started crying again, and my blood ran cold. I could hear something in the background. At first I thought it was wind, a whistle through the cracks of an old house, but no. It was sharper, jagged, almost like an animal's cry, but too twisted, too human. Jacob, I need you to stay calm, I said, trying to keep my own voice steady. Tell me your last name so I can send help. Garrison, he choked. Please, please, it's in the barn. Another noise tore through the line, louder this time. A shrill, guttural sound that made the hairs on my arms stand straight up. Then came the sound of wood splintering, heavy and violent. Jacob screamed so loud I had to pull the headset back. Jacob! I shouted into the line. Jacob, listen to me. Get somewhere safe right now. Lock the door! I can't, he sobbed. It's coming. The phone clattered like he'd dropped it. I could hear his footsteps pounding across wooden floors, then the squeal of hinges as a door slammed, the line filled with his panicked breathing, and then silence. I pressed the headset tight, straining. The silence stretched too long. Jacob, I whispered. Nothing. Then a faint thud, followed by another. Something heavy, moving slow, deliberate. The boy whimpered. Not into the phone, somewhere away from it, closer to the thing that was moving. I whispered his name again, but he didn't answer me. The sound cut off suddenly, and all that was left was static. The call dropped. I sat there frozen, my fingers still clutching the desk. For a second I couldn't even breathe. Then training kicked in. I called it in, gave the deputies the Garrison farm address, and told them what I'd heard. But the thing was, I knew that road. Everyone around here does. The Garrisons had lived on that land for generations. An old, leaning farmhouse with a big weathered barn behind it. I'd driven by it dozens of times. And in all those years, it had always looked the same, like it was holding its breath. The deputies headed out, but I couldn't shake it. The screams, the crashing, that strange animal sound that didn't belong to anything I'd ever heard before. I sat there staring at the darkened console, willing the phone to ring again, for Jacob's voice to come back and tell me he was safe. It never did. All night, I couldn't stop hearing that barn in my head, the groaning wood, the splintering beams, and over it all the sound of Jacob's scream, echoing down a phone line that felt far too thin to hold it. When the deputies finally reported back, their voices were uneasy, clipped short. The house was empty. The barn was locked, and there was no sign of Jacob Garrison anywhere. Just silence. And silence has never felt the same to me since. I wasn't on the road that night. My job was the headset, the console, the voice on the line that bridges people to help. But when I think back, I almost feel like I was there, standing in the dirt with the deputies, looking at that barn. Because I heard everything, and what I heard still makes me sick. After Jacob's call dropped, I sent 2 units out to the Garrison farm. Deputy Miller was the first to check in. He was young, only a few years older than me, And he had this habit of talking too much when he was nervous. That night, though, his voice was clipped, like he was holding something back. "Dispatch, this is Miller. I'm pulling up to the property now. Farmhouse looks dark. No vehicles in sight." I pressed the mic button. "Copy, Miller. Be advised, possible juvenile caller reporting intruder in the barn. Last name Garrison. Parents believed to be off-site. 10 to 4, he said. His engine idled faintly in the background. Then his door creaked open, and the night spilled in around him." The second unit, Deputy Harris, checked in about 3 minutes later. Harris was older, steadier. He didn't rattle easy. "Dispatch, I'm on County Road 7, turning down the drive now. Visual on Miller's unit. We'll make contact and clear the scene." I told them both to use caution. My palms were already damp against the mic, and then the radio started to change. It was subtle at first, just a hiss of static at the end of Miller's reply. But then the words themselves began to distort. His voice wavered, dragged out, like the transmission was passing through water. "Dispatch, I'm approaching..." Crackled. "Front porch. Door looks sec..." Static burst. No movement inside. I sat forward, frowning. We'd had interference before, sure, but this didn't sound like normal static. It almost sounded layered, like two signals overlapping. One, his voice. The other, something lower, crawling under it. I swallowed hard. "Say again, Miller?" "You're cutting out." Nothing for a second, just that warped hiss. Then Harris cut through, but even his voice sounded off, like it was being bent. "Dispatch," crackle. "Visual on barn. Door shut. No external damage." His tone broke in the middle, like someone else had spoken over him, deep and drawn out. My stomach twisted. I told myself it was bad reception. Old radios, trees blocking the signal, all the excuses I could think of. But excuses don't explain what came next. There was a pause, then Miller's voice came back. Higher, breathing fast. "Dispatch, do you copy? I thought I saw..." Static screech. "Window!" Movement inside. My skin prickled. "Confirm, Miller." "Movement inside the barn?" Before he could answer, the channel exploded with garbled noise. Screeches, warbles, the kind of sound you get when you drag a tape too slow across the heads. It went on until finally Harris broke through, shouting, "Miller, hold your position. Don't go in yet." But his words weren't clean either. They fractured, doubled, like there was an echo trying to speak with him. I gripped the mic. "All units maintain radio discipline. Repeat transmissions, over." What came back chilled me to the bone. It wasn't Miller. It wasn't Harris. It was a voice I didn't recognize. Low, drawn out, whispering right into the channel. "It's already here." I froze. My heart slammed against my ribs. Then Miller shouted, clear as day, "Dispatch, did you hear that? Who else is on this frequency?" My mouth went dry. "Negative, Miller. Only you and Harris are on. Say your location." Before he could, the sound of wood cracking roared through the channel. The kind of violent break you feel in your teeth. Miller swore. Harris yelled something muffled. And then silence. "Units, respond," I shouted, panic climbing my throat. "What's your status?" "Harris, Miller, report." Nothing. Just static. But in that static, if you leaned in, you could hear something moving. Heavy, uneven, almost like breathing, pressed too close against the mic. I sat there, paralyzed. Every instinct told me to keep calling out, to get them back, but a smaller, darker part of me whispered, don't. Like if I gave that silence a chance to answer, I wouldn't like what spoke back, finally. Harris's voice cut in again. "Shaky. Dispatch. We're fine." But it didn't sound fine. It sounded wrong. His words dragged like they'd been pushed through mud. And over him, faint but clear, another voice echoed the same words a half-second late. "We're fine." I couldn't even breathe. The channel stayed live, but neither deputy said another word. Just the crackle, the hiss, the heavy silence of a place that wanted no one speaking about it. That was the last clear transmission I got from the Garrison farm that night. And the sick part? I believed Harris when he said they were fine. Not because I thought they were safe, but because something out there wanted me to think they were. The next morning, I came into work early. I hadn't slept at all. My mind kept replaying the call, the broken transmissions, the sound of that voice that didn't belong. I wanted answers. But when I walked into dispatch, all I got were whispers. The deputies who'd been sent out there hadn't filed much. Just a short report. No suspects located. Barn and residence cleared. No child found on scene. That was it. Like Jacob's screams had never happened. But I knew they had. My headset didn't lie. My stomach twisted as I read the report again and again, trying to make it make sense. Hours later, I cornered Miller when he came back into the station. He looked pale, eyes ringed with red like he hadn't slept either. "What happened out there?" I asked. He avoided my gaze. Barn was empty. Nothing inside. His voice was too quick, too rehearsed. "Empty?" I pressed. "What about the noises? The call? The broken door?" He shook his head. "Just old wood. Animals, maybe. Cows were fine when we got there. Barn was locked up tight. Nobody inside." He said it with finality, like repeating it enough would make it true, but the way his hand trembled on his belt told me otherwise. And then Harris walked in. He didn't even look at me. He just signed a sheet, muttered something about needing coffee, and disappeared into the back. The silence around them was worse than anything they could have said. That night, when the room was quiet and the calls slowed to nothing, I pulled up the notes from the farm visit. Just a single line that stood out, written in Miller's messy scrawl: "Interior of barn contains extensive surface damage. Possible vandalism? Surface damage." The phrase nagged at me. I called Miller on the sideline late enough that I knew he wouldn't want to answer, but he picked up anyway. His voice was raw, low. "You wrote about surface damage," I said. "What does that mean?" There was a pause, a long one. Then he whispered, "You don't want to know." But I did. Finally, with a sigh, he told me. Claw marks, all over the inside of the barn, from the floor up to the rafters, like something tried to tear its way out. My hand tightened around the phone. "Animals?" "Not like any I've seen." His voice shook. "Too deep, too wide?" "No pattern, just rage." I didn't say anything for a moment. I thought about Jacob's screams, about the sound of wood cracking on the line, about the voice that whispered it's already here. "And the drawings," Miller added suddenly. That part hadn't been in the report. "Drawings?" He lowered his voice like someone might be listening. "Children's drawings, all over the walls, crayon, pencil, dozens of them. I felt cold all over." "Of what?" He didn't answer at first. Then quietly, figures, tall, thin, always standing by the barn, sometimes inside it, and always watching the house. I wanted to ask if he was sure, but I could hear the weight in his voice. "He was sure? Why didn't you write that down?" I whispered. "Because Harris told me not to," he said. "Said it wasn't evidence. Said we didn't need more eyes on it. The line went dead after that." I sat there for a long time, staring at the blank wall in dispatch. The clock ticked quietly. The console lights blinked steady, but my chest felt tight, like something was pressing in from all sides. That barn wasn't empty, not in the way they wanted it to be. Empty barns don't hold claw marks. Empty barns don't hold children's drawings. Empty barns don't hold voices that bleed into radio static. I never saw it myself, but I could picture it clear as day. The smell of hay and dust, the air thick and stale, wooden walls scarred deep, raked by something with strength enough to tear beams apart. And in the middle of it, scrawled by small hands, those drawings. A child's attempt to make sense of something they weren't supposed to see. I thought about Jacob, about his last words to me, the way his voice cracked as he screamed, "It's coming!" Maybe he'd been drawing it all along. Maybe that's why it came for him. The barn might have been empty when Miller and Harris stepped inside. But it wasn't empty the night Jacob called me, and in some ways, I don't think it was ever empty at all. I've spent years in dispatch, and I can tell you one thing. Calls never leave you. They don't fade. They sit in the back of your mind, waiting. Jacob's call, the boy's voice. It became an echo that lived inside me. But the strangest part was what happened after. At first, it was little things. When I went back to check the call log the next day, the entry was still there, but it looked off. No recording attached. Just a timestamp and a note that said disconnected, disconnected. That wasn't right. I had stayed on the line with him for over 3 minutes. I had written down every detail, every scream, every crack in his voice. And yet, according to the system, it had been nothing more than a hang-up. I thought it was a glitch. Maybe the audio failed. It happens sometimes. But something in my gut told me different. I checked again the following shift. That's when the log itself was gone. No record of Jacob's number. No address. No incident report. Nothing. Like it had never happened. I asked Miller about it when I caught him alone. He froze. His hand tightened on the edge of the desk. Then, without looking at me, he whispered, "Don't ask about it again." That was the first time I realized how deep it went. I couldn't stop myself. I started digging. I went into the county system, searching by address. The farm was still there. Same parcel of land. Same property record. But there was no mention of a child living there. No guardianship. No school enrollment. Not even a birth certificate on file. No Jacob. Every time I typed his name, the system came back blank. I remember sitting there, staring at the screen until my eyes blurred, whispering his name under my breath. Jacob. 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 Like, maybe if I said it enough, the computer would recognize him. But it never did. It was as if the county had erased him, and the more I searched, the more I felt something was searching me back. Like I wasn't just pulling at files, like something was watching me through the system itself. Late at night, when the station was empty, the monitors would flicker, just for a second. Just long enough for me to see static or shapes in the static. Thin shapes, tall, standing too close to the screen. I thought maybe I was losing it. Maybe I wanted to believe in Jacob so badly that I was making things up. But then I found the notebook. It was weeks later, stuffed in the bottom drawer of dispatch, under old forms no one touched anymore. I don't know how it got there. Inside were sketches, dozens of them. Children's sketches. The same kind Miller had whispered about in the barn. Figures, thin, watching, standing by the barn. Standing in the house. Standing by the road, and at the bottom of the last page, scrawled in a child's messy hand, was a single word. My name. I dropped the notebook and backed away like it was burning. My chest was pounding. I wanted to throw it out, to tear it up, to get it out of the station. But some part of me couldn't. Because if I destroyed it, maybe I'd be destroying the only proof Jacob had ever existed. So I hid it instead. But after that, things started to change for me. When the phone rang in the middle of the night, sometimes I swore I heard his voice on the line again, faint and distant. Not words, just breathing, just static, just the sound of a child waiting for me to answer. Other nights, driving home, I'd see movement in the fields. A shape too tall to be a man, standing still in the distance, watching me, and once, God, I wish I could forget this, once I saw him, not the figure, not the tall thing, Jacob. It was just after sunrise, fog rolling low over the road. I was driving past the edge of town when I saw him standing by the ditch. Same messy hair, same small frame. He was holding something in his hand. A crayon, I think. I slammed the brakes, heart hammering, but by the time I looked again, he was gone. Just empty road stretching into the fog. I didn't tell anyone. I couldn't. How could I explain it when the county swore he never existed? That was the cruelest part. Not that he disappeared. Not that he screamed for help and no one came. But that now, no one even remembered him. He was gone from the records. Gone from the reports. Gone from the mouths of the deputies who'd been there that night. And yet he wasn't gone from me. I carried him with me. His voice, his drawings, his fear. Sometimes when I close my eyes, I can still hear the sound of him screaming, "It's coming." And I believe him. Because whatever was in that barn, whatever erased him from this world, it's still here. I don't know how I know, but I feel it. Every time the radio crackles in the dead of night. Every time static lingers a second too long. Every time I pass by a dark field and see something standing where nothing should be, the reports will tell you nothing happened. The county records will tell you Jacob never lived. But I was there. I heard him, and some nights I think he's still out there, lost in whatever place took him, calling but never heard. The worst part? I think he knows I'm the only one who remembers. And maybe one day when the line rings again, I won't just hear him, I'll see him. And when that happens, I don't think I'll come back either. because you can't erase a boy like Jacob without erasing the person who keeps his memory alive. And if I'm the last one left, then I think I know what's coming for me. I still remember the first time I picked up that call. The night shift at the 911 center is usually quiet. Most nights it's the same kind of emergencies: domestic fights, drunk drivers, the occasional burglary alarm. You get used to a certain rhythm. The phones ring, you answer, you type, you dispatch. That night, though, the phone rang, and from the moment I said, 911, what's your emergency? Something felt off. The line was filled with static. Not the normal kind either. It was sharp, like ice cracking in your ear. I almost hung up, thinking it was a prank, when a woman's voice came through. Please, she whispered. You have to send someone. He's in the house. Her voice wasn't frantic like most calls. It was shaky, yes, but calm in this eerie way, like she'd already accepted something. I asked her to repeat herself, and she gave me an address. I typed it into the system. Nothing. The mapping software didn't recognize it. The street didn't exist. I double-checked, thinking maybe she'd misspoken, but she repeated it again, slow and clear. Same numbers. Same street name. Ma'am, I said carefully, I need you to verify. Are you sure that's the correct address? Her breathing got heavier. I've lived here all my life, please, he's... She cut off, like she'd turned away from the phone. I could hear faint footsteps. The creak of floorboards. Ma'am, who's in the house with you? I pressed. Silence, except for the sound of her trying not to breathe too loud. Then in a broken whisper, he doesn't knock anymore. He just comes in. Something about the way she said it made my skin crawl. I tried again, asking if there were cross streets or landmarks, anything at all to help us locate her. She sounded like she wanted to answer, but then there was this crash on the line, like the phone had been dropped. I shouted into the headset, asked if she was okay. I heard her scream once. Not a long scream. Just one sharp sound. Then the line went dead. I stared at my screen. The call ID showed a number, but when I tried to trace it, the system flagged it. Invalid source. That wasn't possible. I flagged it as high priority and called my supervisor over. He leaned over my shoulder, scanned the details, and frowned. That's not in our jurisdiction, he muttered. It's not in anyone's jurisdiction, I said. The address doesn't exist. He gave me this look, half annoyed, half unsettled. Probably a prank. Log it and move on. But I couldn't. That woman's voice stuck in my head. The way she said he doesn't knock anymore. Like it had been happening for a long time. I stayed after my shift, even though I wasn't supposed to. I searched the address online. Nothing. Not a single hit. No old records, no businesses, no property listings. It was like that street had never existed. But the way she said she'd lived there her whole life. She believed it was real. I didn't sleep that morning. I kept thinking about the sound in the background. Those footsteps. The creaking wood. The scream. When I came back the next night, I told myself to let it go. Calls like that happen. Sometimes people give wrong information. Sometimes it's delusion or drugs or mental illness. You can't save everyone. That's what they tell you. But then it happened again. 2 nights later, the phone rang around 2 a.m. Same static on the line. My stomach dropped before I even spoke. What's your emergency? This time it was a man. His voice was low, shaking. He gave an address. Different numbers, but the same street name. The exact same street name from the first call. I froze. He said someone was trying to break into his house. He sounded panicked, but also tired. Like this wasn't the first time he'd called. I pulled up the system, tried again. Same result. The address didn't exist. Sir? I asked. Are you sure that's your location? He snapped at me, desperate. Of course it is. I can see the street sign from my window. What the hell kind of question is that? I didn't know what to say. Then I heard it. That same sound as before. Floorboards creaking. Slow, heavy footsteps. The man went quiet. I heard him whisper to himself. He's here. I tried to keep him talking, but the line filled with static again. His voice broke through once, screaming, "Don't let him in!" Then silence. Just like the first time. The number vanished from the system. Invalid source. No trace. I reported it again. This time, my supervisor told me flat out to stop chasing ghosts. He said if I logged another one of these phantom calls, I'd be written up for wasting resources. but I couldn't shake it. 2 calls, 2 different people, same street name, same ending. That night I couldn't eat, couldn't even look at food. All I could hear in my head was that phrase, "He's here." It felt less like a warning and more like a fact. By the 3rd call, I knew something was deeply wrong. It was a woman again. Not the same one as before, but her voice had the same drained quality, like she'd been hollowed out. She begged me to send someone. Said she could see a figure standing in her backyard. She gave the same street name. Again. I asked her to describe her house. She did. White siding, green shutters, porch light burned out. She gave little details like that. Too specific to be random. I asked her to hold on while I tried to route a unit, but I already knew what the system would say. The address wasn't real. When I told her we couldn't locate her, she started to cry. "No one ever finds us," she whispered. I tried to calm her, told her to stay on the line. But as she cried, her voice faded like she was being pulled further away. And then I realized it wasn't her moving. It was the line itself. The sound grew distant, like the call was unraveling. Her last words barely reached me. "He's at the door." Then, static, and gone. 3 calls, all from a place that didn't exist. I didn't sleep that week. I kept thinking about that street, kept hearing their voices, their screams, their silence. I started writing the name down, over and over, filling notebooks with it, trying to force it to mean something. If a street had that name somewhere, maybe I could find it. But every search came up empty. No maps, no archives, no history. It was like they were calling from a town that had been erased. And the worst part? Each time the caller sounded like they knew me. Like they weren't just dialing a random number, like they expected me to answer. I couldn't stop thinking about those calls. 3 different voices, 3 different houses, but the same street name. A place that didn't exist. I thought about letting it go, like my supervisor told me. I tried. I told myself it was some kind of elaborate prank, some twisted game. But I knew better. The panic in their voices wasn't something you could fake. You can hear when someone's just messing around. And you can hear when someone believes they're about to die. The thing that broke me was the 3rd call. That woman's words, "No one ever finds us," kept circling in my head like a curse. I couldn't just sit behind a desk anymore. I needed proof. So the next time it happened, I made sure a unit went out. It was a slow Tuesday night. The center was half empty, just the hum of machines and the occasional phone ringing. Around midnight, the line lit up. I knew it was the same before I even answered. The static, the way it hissed and cracked in my ear. 911, what's your emergency?" I asked, but my voice came out weak. This time it was a young man. He sounded out of breath, whispering like he didn't want to be overheard. He said someone was pounding on his front door, said the glass in his window had already cracked. He gave me the street name. The same one. I froze for a moment, my hand hovering over the keyboard. I already knew what the system would tell me, but this time I didn't care. I typed in the numbers anyway. When the screen blinked red, address not found, I ignored it. Instead, I patched through to dispatch. Possible home invasion, I told them. Sending nearest unit. My supervisor heard me and stormed over, waving his arms. "What are you doing?" "We've been over this." But I kept my headset pressed to my ear. I wasn't going to let this one fade into static like the rest. "I've got a victim on the line," I said. "We're sending someone." He glared at me, but once the words were spoken, it was done. A unit was already rolling out. The caller kept whispering updates. "He's on the porch. I can see his shadow under the door." His voice cracked. "Please, please hurry." I tried to keep him calm. "Stay with me. The officers are on their way." Inside, I knew I was lying. Because how do you send someone to a place that isn't real? Still, the unit drove out. 2 officers, seasoned guys. I heard them check in over the radio. Calm and professional at first. Then confusion. "Control. We're at the location provided. There's nothing here." I leaned closer to my screen. "What do you mean, nothing?" Static crackled, and then the officer repeated, slower this time. "It's just fields. Open ground. No structures, no lights, no town." I stared at the map, my fingers tightening around the keyboard. But the caller was still in my ear, panicked now. "He's inside. He's inside. I can hear him." I wanted to scream. The caller was begging for help from a house that, according to the officers, didn't exist. "Control. One of the officers radioed again. His voice had a strange edge to it, like he didn't trust what he was seeing. "There's a road here, but it doesn't show up on GPS. Looks like it hasn't been used in years. We're pulling off to check." My supervisor grabbed the headset from me, snapping at them to return. Said we weren't going to waste resources chasing ghosts. But the officers didn't answer right away. Instead, the radio crackled, and I heard one of them mutter almost to himself, "There's a sign here." Rusted out. "Looks like it used to mark a street." My heart stopped. They'd found it. The call in my ear was breaking down again. The man was sobbing, whispering words I could barely understand. All I caught were fragments. "He's in the hall. He doesn't stop. He never stops." Then silence. I called his name, but the line had already gone cold. Just static. And on the radio, one of the officers said, "This is strange. There's foundations here. Like old houses, but they're gone. Just outlines in the dirt. Ever seen something like this?" His partner muttered back, "Feels like a ghost town. But there's no record of a town being here. Not in decades." I sat frozen, listening. My supervisor pulled the plug, ordered them to leave, told me I was off phones for the night. But before the channel cut, I heard one last thing. One of the officers, sounding unsettled, whispered, "For a second, I thought I saw lights, like a row of houses. But when I blinked, it was just fields again." Then nothing. The unit drove back, empty-handed. They filed the report as location unverified, and that was the end of it, at least for them. But not for me. I couldn't stop picturing it. Empty fields, but shadows of something that used to be there. A road no GPS could find. A street sign rusted and bent. And those voices. People trapped in houses that don't stand anymore. I started digging. I spent nights combing through old county records, maps, anything I could get my hands on. Nothing. No mention of that street. No history of a town there. It was like it had been erased. But I knew the officers hadn't lied. I could hear it in their voices. The unease. The way they spoke like men who had just stepped somewhere they shouldn't. And the calls didn't stop. Every few nights another one would come in. Always the same static, always the same street name. Sometimes a man, sometimes a woman. Once even a child, whispering about a man at his window. I tried to route units again, but after what happened, my supervisor banned me. Said if I pulled another stunt like that, I'd be fired. So I stopped calling it in. But I didn't stop listening. Each time I wrote everything down. The houses they described, the way their voices broke, the last words before the line went dead. I kept it all in a notebook. And one thing became clear. They weren't describing different places. They were all describing the same neighborhood. Same cracked porches. Same peeling paint. Same broken streetlights. It was like piece by piece. I was mapping a town that shouldn't exist. The Hollow Town. That's what I started calling it, late at night, staring at my notes. Because it wasn't just gone, it was hollowed out. Like something had scooped the life out of it but left the shadows behind. And the worst part? The calls weren't slowing down. They were getting more frequent. Each time I thought maybe it would be the last. But they always came back. The voices, the static, the pleading, and every time, they sounded closer. Like the Hollow Town wasn't just calling from nowhere anymore. It was moving closer to us, closer to me. After the officers came back from those empty fields, I told myself I'd stop. I told myself I'd bury the whole thing. Calls come in every night. Domestic fights, overdoses, car wrecks. I had more than enough real emergencies to deal with. But then the phone would ring and that sound would come through. That static. I knew it was them before they even spoke. The first time after the dispatch, it was a little boy. His voice was so soft, I thought at first it was a prank. But then I heard the way he whispered, the way he fought to keep his words steady. He said, "My mom's asleep, but there's a man outside. He keeps walking around the house." I asked him his name and he told me. I wrote it down. I asked him for the address. Same street name. Always the same. The boy sounded like he was holding the phone tight against his chest. I could hear his breathing, quick and shallow. "Is the door locked?" I asked. He paused. Then, in the smallest voice, he said, "He has the key." Something about the way he said it nearly made me drop the headset. I tried to keep him calm. I told him to stay where he was, to hide if he could. But the line was breaking apart, like always. His words stretched and bent through the static. The last thing I heard was him whispering, "He's in the hall." Then the call ended. I sat there, staring at the blank screen, my own reflection in the monitor. I felt sick, like I'd failed him, even though deep down I knew he had never been someone I could save. The next night, it was someone else. A woman this time. She said she lived in a white house with a picket fence, and she sounded angry when I asked for details. "You don't remember me?" she asked. "I've called before." "You never come." Her words hit me hard. I wanted to explain, to tell her that I had tried, that I had sent people, but there was nothing there. But before I could, she started crying. Not loud, broken sobs. Just these quiet, hopeless sounds, like she was tired of repeating herself. She begged me not to hang up. She begged me to stay on the line, even if I couldn't send anyone. I stayed. I stayed as long as I could. But eventually, the call unraveled. The sobbing grew faint, then distant, then gone. Every call after that felt like a nail being driven into me. It wasn't just the fear in their voices. It was the repetition, the way they spoke, like they knew me, like they'd called before, and maybe they had. I started noticing something. Small details. The boy's cracked window matched the description of the man's house from the week before. The woman's broken porch light was the same as the one another caller had mentioned. Piece by piece, they were describing the same place, same neighborhood, same houses. But each time the people were different. Different names, different families, different voices. And yet they all sounded trapped in the same moment, like they were living in the same night, repeating it over and over. One man swore he could hear sirens coming down his street. He thanked me, said he could see flashing lights outside. But when I checked the log, no units had gone out. There were no sirens, no lights. The way he screamed when the door burst open, it still makes my stomach twist. Another caller was an elderly woman. She said she'd lived in that house for 50 years, but her memory was frayed, her voice soft and shaky. She asked me if it was Sunday. She asked me if her husband was still alive, and then, almost like she was talking to herself, she whispered, "He doesn't look the same anymore. His face isn't his face." Her voice broke apart before I could ask what she meant. Each night the voices piled up. A chorus of the lost. Some begged, some cried, some whispered, but all of them called from the same street. I started keeping a second notebook just for the voices. I wrote down their names, their ages if they gave them, the little details of their homes. By the end of the week, the pages looked like a census of a town that didn't exist. And here's the part that still chills me. The more I wrote them down, the more real they felt. I could picture the boy's cracked window, the woman's broken porch light, the elderly woman's kitchen with its old wallpaper and ticking clock. I could see the town forming in my head. House by house, street by street, and sometimes when I closed my eyes, I felt like I wasn't just imagining it. I felt like I was remembering it, like I'd been there once. The worst call came late one night, just before my shift ended. I almost didn't answer, but the static pulled me in. It was a man's voice, deep, calm, almost too calm. He didn't sound panicked like the others. He didn't beg for help. He just said my name, not sir, not dispatcher, my actual name. I froze. I didn't remember giving it. Then he said, "You've been writing it down. All of us, every word, every house. We know." My mouth went dry. I couldn't speak. The man chuckled, low and hollow. "Don't stop. You're the only one who remembers us." And then softer, "He doesn't like that." The line cut out. I sat there, shaking, my notebook open in front of me. Pages filled with names and addresses that didn't exist. I thought about tearing it all up, burning it, pretending none of this had ever happened. But I couldn't, because part of me believed them. Part of me believed that if I stopped writing, if I stopped remembering, they would disappear completely, and maybe that was worse than the horror of hearing their voices. Maybe that was what the Hollow Town wanted, to be forgotten. But I couldn't forget. Not anymore. The voices wouldn't. I knew I wasn't supposed to do it. Dispatchers aren't meant to leave their desks. We're trained to be voices, not rescuers. To take down the details, to pass them on, to never put ourselves into the story. But after weeks of listening to the voices, after filling page after page with names and addresses that didn't exist, I couldn't sit there anymore. It was eating me alive. I'd wake up in the middle of the day, hearing phantom rings from the headset that wasn't on my head. I'd hear faint whispers in the walls of my apartment. I'd jolt awake thinking I heard someone breathing beside my bed. And worst of all, I started dreaming about the town. Not dreams in the normal sense. They felt heavier. They felt like visits. I'd walk streets I'd never seen before, but they were already familiar to me. Cracked sidewalks, weeds pushing through the gaps. Houses with sagging porches, curtains that never seemed to move. In every dream, I saw the street sign. The name from the calls. Rusted, bent, but still there. The hollow town was already inside me. So one night I broke. I told myself I was just going to drive, just to see, just to prove to myself that it was all in my head. It was 2 a.m. when I clocked out. The roads were empty. The kind of stillness where even the air feels heavy. I drove with no real plan. Just the name of that street echoing in my head. I must have gone 30, 40 miles past the edge of the county. Roads got darker. Fields stretched out forever, broken only by patches of trees. I had almost convinced myself I was wasting gas when my phone buzzed. It shouldn't have. I hadn't called anyone. But the screen lit up with the same number from the first call. My stomach dropped. I didn't answer. I just stared at the glow of the phone on the passenger seat until it stopped. When I looked up again, I saw it. A side road, narrow, overgrown, and a sign. Rusted. Faded. But the letters were there. The name of the street. My hands turned the wheel before I even thought about it. The road was rough. Gravel crunching under my tires. The trees leaned in close, their branches scraping the roof of my car. And then it opened up. Fields stretched out on either side. Empty, silent, just like the officers had said. But I kept driving. Slower now. Every nerve in my body screaming at me to turn back. That's when the radio crackled. Not my car radio. Not the station I'd been half listening to earlier. It was the dispatch frequency. I knew that sound. The same static I'd heard 100 times in my headset, and beneath it, voices, faint, overlapping, too many to count. Whispers rising and falling like wind through dead leaves. I pulled over, shaking. My headlights cut across the empty field, lighting nothing but tall grass. But the voices were clearer now, and I realized something. They weren't coming from the radio. They were coming from the field. I killed the engine. Sat in silence, gripping the steering wheel so hard my hands ached. The air outside was thick. Still. No insects. No nightbirds. Just the low, steady hum of those voices. I forced myself to get out of the car. The gravel crunched under my shoes. The air smelled faintly of smoke, though I saw no fire. And then I noticed shapes in the grass. Foundations. Stone outlines half buried in dirt, like the ghosts of houses that had once stood there. I walked toward them, heart hammering in my chest. The closer I got, the clearer the whispers became. They weren't just random voices. They were the calls. The boy, whispering about the man at the window. The woman begging me not to hang up. The old woman, asking if it was Sunday. Every voice I'd written down. All of them, layered together, repeating their last words over and over. I stumbled back, covering my ears. But it didn't matter. The sound wasn't just in the air. It was in me. Then I saw lights. For a second, I thought it was my headlights reflecting off something. But no. It was windows. Rows of faint yellow lights flickering into existence. Like lanterns behind glass. Houses. Whole houses. Standing where a moment ago there had only been empty fields. They stretched down the street in both directions. Neat rows of homes. Porches. Street lamps. Driveways. The hollow town. It was right there. I felt my body moving without permission, stepping toward it. My breath fogged in the air even though the night wasn't cold. The closer I got, the less real it felt. The houses wavered, like they were half submerged in water. But the voices grew sharper. louder. And then I saw them. Figures behind the windows, pale, indistinct, pressed close to the glass, mouths moving, words I couldn't quite hear, but they were calling me. They were waiting for me. My knees nearly gave out. I forced myself to stop at the edge of the cracked pavement, the threshold where the gravel met the road. Every instinct screamed at me not to cross. And then I heard him, the man from the call, the calm voice that had spoken my name. Only this time it wasn't through a phone line. It was behind me. "Come in," he said. I spun around, but there was no one there. Just the empty road, my car parked in the dark. When I turned back, the lights in the houses were dimming. One by one, they went out. The figures in the windows sank back into the shadows. The voices faded into the static of the night. And then, in a blink, it was gone. No houses. No street lamps, just empty fields again. I stood there shaking, my notebook heavy in my jacket pocket. I don't remember getting back into the car. I don't remember turning the key. I just remember the tires spitting gravel as I drove back toward the highway. My hands slick with sweat on the wheel. When I finally got home, the sky was already pale with dawn. I sat on my couch, staring at the notebook, the pen still tucked into the spine. I knew I should stop. I knew I should close it and never open it again, but instead, I flipped to a blank page and wrote, "I saw it," because it was real. The hollow town was real. And now that I'd visited, I knew it wasn't going to let me go. After the night I drove out there, I couldn't go back to normal. I tried. I sat at the desk, headset on, listening for real emergencies. Car wrecks, overdoses, break-ins. But the sound of those calls barely touched me anymore. All I could hear in them was the echo of something else, something underneath. The hollow town had followed me back. I could feel it. My co-workers noticed the change. They said I looked pale, tired, that I was zoning out. But how could I explain it? How could I tell them that when I closed my eyes, I still saw those houses glowing faintly in the dark? That sometimes, when the phone wasn't ringing, I swore I could still hear voices whispering my name? I stopped sleeping. Or maybe I just forgot how. Hours slipped away like water down a drain. I'd blink, and it would be morning again, though I didn't remember the night. That's when the recordings started. I came in one evening, logged into my console like always, and saw the notification. Audio flagged, stored under my ID. That wasn't unusual. Sometimes the system recorded snippets for training, or if the call was especially strange. But when I opened the file, my whole body froze. It was me. My voice. But I didn't remember speaking. The first recording was 2 hours long. 2 hours of me whispering into the line, steady and low. Not panicked. Not frantic, just talking. At first I thought maybe I was just repeating call logs, stress bleeding into the job. But the more I listened, the more I realized these weren't words I'd ever written. I was describing things, street names, houses, families. I was building the town out loud, and in the background, other voices answered, dozens of them, overlapping, echoing, like a choir of broken radios. Sometimes they repeated what I said, word for word. Other times they corrected me, and then sometimes they laughed. Not cruelly, not loudly, just this low, hollow laugh that felt worse than screaming. I yanked the headset off, shaking. My supervisor glanced over, annoyed, but I didn't care. I deleted the file. Or at least I tried to. But when I logged in again the next night, there were 3 more, each longer than the last, each filled with my voice, speaking words I didn't remember. One of them chilled me more than anything else, because in that one, my voice didn't sound like mine. It was slower, deeper, almost like someone else was using my mouth to speak. And the last thing it said, before the recording cut off, was, "You're almost home." I sat there in the dark, the glow of the screen painting my face, and I thought, maybe this isn't about them anymore. Maybe it's about me. The hollow town wasn't just calling through the lines. It was calling through me. I stopped writing in the notebook. At least that's what I told myself. But when I woke up one afternoon after a shift, I found pages filled that I didn't remember touching. Whole paragraphs, written in my handwriting but not mine. Descriptions of rooms I'd never seen, of people I'd never met. One page ended with a single sentence scrawled over and over again until the ink bled through. Stay on the line. Stay on the line. Stay on the line. I started to wonder if maybe I'd never left the town. Maybe the night I drove out there, I crossed a threshold without realizing it. Maybe what came back wasn't really me anymore. The recordings kept piling up. One night, I forced myself to listen to the newest one all the way through, 4 hours long. At first, it was the same as before, me describing streets that didn't exist, voices answering. But halfway in, it changed. The voices began asking me questions, and I answered. Not like a dispatcher, not like myself, but like a resident. They asked me about my house, and I described the cracked steps leading up to the porch, the broken light over the door, the wallpaper in the hallway peeling at the corners. They asked me about my neighbors, and I gave them names. Names I'd never heard before. They asked me if I could hear the footsteps yet, and I said yes. By the end of the file, I wasn't just describing the hollow town, I was living in it. When the recording stopped, I sat there for a long time, staring at the empty waveforms on the screen. Then I realized my radio was still on, and from the earpiece, faint but steady, I could hear breathing. Not mine, slow, heavy, patient. I tore the headset off and shut down the console. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. That was 3 nights ago. Since then, I've avoided the center. I told them I was sick. I locked myself in my apartment, unplugged the phone, turned off the lights. But it doesn't matter, because the hollow town doesn't need wires anymore. It's inside me. Last night, I woke up on the floor with my radio beside me. I don't remember bringing it home. I don't even remember leaving the center with it. The battery was dead, but when I turned it on, it crackled to life. And I heard my own voice. Not live. Not now. A recording. Hours of me whispering. But this time I wasn't just describing the town. I was giving directions. Turn left at the rusted sign. Drive past the fields. Keep going until the road ends. I was guiding someone in. I don't know who. I don't know if it was meant for me. But the voice on the recording kept repeating one phrase, over and over like a mantra. Don't hang up. Don't hang up. Don't hang up. I can still hear it now, even with the radio off. Even with everything unplugged. I think maybe the calls were never coming from them. I think maybe they were coming from me all along. And I don't know how much longer I can resist, because the line isn't disconnected anymore. It's always open, and every time I close my eyes, I can hear them. Closer, clearer, waiting. The first time I heard about the tall man, I thought it was a kid's game. I was half asleep at my desk when the line lit up. Midnight shift, the kind where the room hums and your eyes feel like sand. I answered like I always did. Calm, soft, the practiced voice so people would tell me everything before panic swallowed their words. What's your emergency? A small voice, breathy and careful. Is someone there? Yeah, I said. I'm here. Who am I talking to? Lily, she said. 4 syllables, like she had counted them on her fingers. Lily Harper. Her last name was the first thing I wrote down. The second was the house number she gave me. The third was the way she said, "Don't tell Mommy." That should have been my cue to call for welfare checks, to dispatch patrol, to keep her on the line until help arrived. Protocol is protocol, but the thing about late-night calls is you learn to feel the differences. There's the loud, breathless panic of a car crash, the frantic, clipped yelling of someone who's been robbed. Then there are calls like Lily's, small and still, like a pond surface that's been held too long. She whispered, "There's a man by my window." Outside your house? I asked. No, she said slower. Outside my bedroom window. Her voice dropped to a hush. He's very tall. He stands very still. I asked her how long he'd been there. Always, she said. Like that answered everything. Since the lights went out, I could hear the house around her. The soft click of a clock, the faint rustle of something in another room, the sound of a house breathing. Okay, Lily, can you tell me what he looks like? I asked, keeping my voice steady. She hummed a small sound of thought. He's like a shadow that grew legs. He doesn't have a face. His suit is black, but it doesn't shine. He's like a cutout from paper, but big. She was describing a thing a child couldn't have seen and named from any book I knew. Her words felt wrong and honest at the same time. Does he touch the glass? I asked. No, she said. Not yet. He just looks at me. And what do you want me to do? I asked, because sometimes children just want a grown-up voice to listen. Sometimes that's all it takes to make the world feel safer. She sighed, a very small sound, like the kind you make when you pretend you're not scared. Stay, she said. Don't hang up. So I stayed. I told her about the officers on the way, even though I had no idea how long they would take, and even though the address she gave me came back clean on our maps. Her cross streets matched nothing in our database. That's not unusual. Kids mix up names or families give old road names. But the address felt wrong in a way I couldn't explain. It sat at the edge of everything I knew, like a loose brick. She hummed along as I spoke. He heard the car, she said suddenly. He turned his head. Why did he turn his head, mister? He doesn't have ears. I didn't answer that. Instead, I kept my questions simple. Did she have a door she could lock? Was the bedroom door shut? Were the curtains closed? Yes. No. Yes. The answers were quick, clipped. She was following some rhythm. The house noises kept coming. The clock, the heater, the tiny squeak as the floor settled. He's looking at my drawings, she said. He likes them. What kind of drawings? I asked, because children talk about drawings. They talk about drawings like old friends. On my wall, she said. I draw him, but I draw him small. I drew his hat once. He didn't like the hat. Did he say anything when he didn't like it? No, she said. He only watches and he waits. Sometimes he taps the glass, not loud. A little like someone counting. The image of counting fingers made me think of cold hands, and I realized my palms were sweating. I told her to stay away from the window, to move to the hallway if she could, to sit on the floor and put a blanket over her head like we teach kids to do in drills. She did as I asked, with a slow, careful obedience that told me she was used to following orders she didn't understand. When I asked how her mother was, Lily went quiet for a long time. Finally, she said, Mommy's asleep. She says the electricity's been weird all night. She's in the kitchen with the radio on. She hums to herself so she doesn't hear him. A train of murmurs and sudden silence passed over the line. I tried calling the number back to verify. The trace came up with a routing detail that didn't make sense. The call's origin was a local exchange, but the routing marker flagged an old tower, one of the ones we thought had been decommissioned years ago. Old equipment throws weird numbers sometimes. So do pranksters. So does grief. Do you have a nightlight? I asked, fingers tapping at keys that weren't going to find anything new. No, Lily said. The bulb went out. He likes the dark better. I told her to sing, to make a noise, to keep talking to me. People hear their own voices and feel steadier. She sang a few timid lines of a nursery rhyme, off-key and very small. The rhyme continued in my head for the rest of my shift, a thin thread over the static. And then, faint, like someone turning a page in another room, there was a sound on her end. A soft rap against glass. Once, twice. Lily whispered, He's tapping. Count, I told her. Count each tap out loud. 1, she said. 2, 3. The tapping stopped. I told her to stay put, to breathe, to stay with me no matter what. I told her I was going to keep her line open. I told her I would not hang up. I meant it the way people mean things at night, with a solemnity that pretends it can hold back the dark. On my screen, the unit closest to her area, the one that patrols the old neighborhoods, checked in. Unit en route to possible welfare check, their voice said over the radio. The channel had that steady calm of men who see the worst and keep going anyway. I passed the address in the notes. I stayed on the line with Lily until the officers acknowledged. They said they'd be there in 5. Please hurry, she said. I heard a creak on her end, the kind that made me think of floorboards and someone moving slowly, trying not to make noise. Then a voice. Not a voice on the line, but a voice over the wire, so soft I almost missed it. Lily, whispered a man's voice, close, Too close. Are you awake, sweetheart? The blood in my neck went hot. This was not an adult's sleepy whisper to a child. This was a low, thick sound, like something measured and patient. I told Lily to stay where she was, to pull the blanket higher. Her breathing quickened. "Don't talk to him," she said. "He likes my blanket. Who is he?" I asked. "Because my job gives you the strange courage to ask obvious things." "No one," she said. "He's tall." The officers called in again, static and then voice. "We're 5 minutes out," they said. But 5 minutes on a radio could be 10, sometimes 20. Life doesn't care about clocks. On the line, there was a new noise. The soft scratch of fingernails on glass. Not too loud. Not panicked. Just persistent. It sounded like someone checking for a crack, testing the barrier. "Count," I said again. "Count the scratches. 1, 2, 3, 4. Lily's voice dragged on the numbers as if each one took a piece of her courage away. At 7, her whisper broke. Then the static swallowed the line for a sliver of time. When the call came back, her breathing was faster. There was an odd hollow echo overlaying the sound, like someone else breathing behind her, but not on the phone. "Who is that?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She didn't answer. She began to hum again, the nursery rhyme, softer than before. Something on my skin prickled, and I realized I was humming too, without meaning to. It was the human response, mimicked to calm. But it felt wrong, like singing along with a shadow. Then, through the static, I heard a voice that wasn't hers. Not the man's voice from before. It was lower, calm, precise. "Stay with me," it said. "Keep the line open. Don't let the lights go out." The words were for me, not Lily. But Lily answered, as if in two places at once. I won't. I asked the officers to hurry. Radio checks, location updates. We tracked their progress like we do with all the small emergencies that matter to one person and nothing to a world outside their house. Outside the window, the night kept moving in the indifferent, slow way of weather. On the call, the tapping became a little more urgent. The sound shifted from testing to searching. A new sound followed it. A long, low sigh that made my teeth ache. Lily inhaled and did not exhale for a beat that felt like an hour. Then, there was a soft scrape, like hands sliding along window trim. Like something learning the outline of a space. The radio crackled with static, and for a second, every voice on the line sounded like it was in a room with me. "I'm here," the officer said finally, voice close. "Ma'am? Miss? Anyone?" Lily started to cry, hiccuping small noises that tore something in my chest. "Please," she said into the phone. "He's at the window now." There was in my ear the faintest sound of cloth against glass. A pause. Then, a soft, patient voice that made no sense because nothing in our world is patient like that. "You keep talking, little one. Don't be quiet for me." I didn't have time to think about the wrongness before the radio burst with motion. Tire screech, doors, voices shouting. The line with Lily burst then, too. Not cut cleanly, but like someone had unspooled it. The sound of wind through a pipe. When the call finally came through again, Lily was gone. Not off the line, but gone, like a light bulb blown out. The last thing on the recording was her whisper. So small I could barely hear it. He learned how to open doors. We found her mother in the kitchen, eyes red, radio still on, humming that same tune while staring at a dark window. She swore no one else was home. Officers checked the house top to bottom. No sign of forced entry. No tall man. No footprints. Lily was never seen again. They closed the file as a missing child case. There were notes about strange routing numbers and an old transmission tower. There were suggestions about counseling and a calm clinical person suggesting I take some time off. They wrote unverified and no signs and possible fabrication in the margins. But at night, when I sit alone and the house breathes around me, I hear a soft tap on my window. It's a small sound, a polite knock, a question. And sometimes when I can't sleep, I whisper into the dark, and I wait to see if the tall man will answer back. I thought I was done with the case after Lily. That's what happens most of the time. You take the call, you hand it off, and the file goes into the system like everything else. It gets tagged, updated, passed along to people with badges and uniforms. Sometimes you hear the follow-up, sometimes you don't. But it always moves away from you. It becomes someone else's problem, but not this one. This one came back. The officers who took the call didn't report much at first. Just possible missing child, welfare check. Standard language. Nothing unusual. But then, I got a copy of the field notes, and that's when I read about the footprints. They said the ground was soft that night. There had been rain the evening before, the kind that leaves everything damp and smelling of dirt. The grass around the Harper house was heavy with dew, and in that wet soil they found them. Footprints circling the house, not just once, not just twice, but dozens of times, around and around like someone had been pacing, there for hours. But here's the part that made me stop reading and just sit there staring at the page. They weren't human. They were too big, each. Print was longer than a man's foot, wide at the heel, narrow at the toe, with an odd arch that made no sense. The stride was wrong, too. Not just long, but uneven, like the legs didn't belong to the same body. And the depth of them. That's what really bothered me. The ground was pressed down so deep it was like something had been standing there, waiting, shifting its weight from one side to the other, over and over, as if the act of waiting was all it needed. The note said the footprints trailed away into the woods behind the property. The officers followed them for a while, but they never seemed to end. No matter how far they went, the prints were always ahead of them, curving back toward the house, circling again. One officer wrote something in the margin that wasn't meant for the file. I could tell because the handwriting was rushed, almost shaky. He wrote, "It feels like he's still there, like we're walking in his path, not after it." I read that line 3 times before I closed the folder. I didn't know what to do with it. Most of the time, when I hear things on calls that don't make sense, I let them go. You have to. People say strange things under stress. Kids especially. Monsters, shadows, voices in the dark. It's all part of fear. You can't take it at face value. If you did, you'd drive yourself crazy. But the footprints weren't fear. They were evidence. Something had been there. Something larger than any man. And it had walked circles around that house, around Lily's window, until she whispered to me about the tall man who didn't have a face. I couldn't stop thinking about her, her little voice, careful and steady. The way she counted the taps, like each number was a thread holding her in place. The way she said, "He likes the dark better." When the officers went back to the Harper house the next morning, they found the mother sitting at the kitchen table, staring at the radio. The note said she was responsive but detached. That's the kind of language they use when someone is too far gone to help. She told them Lily was at her aunt's, that she'd left in the night, walked down the road, and never came back. But there was no aunt. No family listed anywhere. When they pressed her, she grew angry. Said they were making things up. Said they were trying to confuse her. Said there was no child in the house, and never had been. But the drawings on the bedroom wall said otherwise. That was the other thing in the report. The walls were covered in crayon drawings, the same figure, over and over, tall, black, without a face, sometimes standing outside the window, sometimes standing in the room, sometimes with arms that stretched too far, reaching across the page as if the paper couldn't hold them, and in every drawing, there were little marks. Dots, dashes, small lines in groups of 3 or 4, like counting, like tapping. I couldn't get it out of my head. The officers tried to document everything, but the photos didn't come out right. That's what one of them told me later, off the record. He said every picture of the footprints turned up blank, just mud and grass. Every shot of the drawings looked blurred, like the walls had been smeared. But he swore to me that they were there. That's when I realized the call hadn't ended. It was still going. Every night after, I found myself listening for the sound. Not the phone, not the radio. Something else. A faint tap at the edge of hearing. 1, 2, 3, sometimes 4. I told myself it was just the house settling. Old pipes, tired wood, the natural breathing of a building. But in the dark, I kept imagining a set of footprints outside my own window, circling, shifting weight, waiting. And sometimes, I thought I saw movement in the glass. Not a face, not even a shape. Just the impression of something tall, too tall, where nothing should be. I started dreaming of him too. In the dreams, I was back at the call desk. The line was open, the headset pressed against my ear. But it wasn't Lily's voice I heard. It was mine, whispering, counting. Sometimes I'd wake up with the number still on my lips. 1, 2, 3. Over and over, I didn't tell anyone. What could I say? That a missing child had slipped into my head? That her monster had followed me home? Nobody would believe me. But then I got another file. Not from my supervisor. Not through official channels. Slipped under my keyboard in a plain folder, no markings. Inside was a single photo. Grainy, black and white. It showed the back of the Harper house. The window where Lily said he stood, and behind it, faint but there, a shadow. Long, tall, arms stretched down past the frame. No face, no features, just a hole in the shape of a man. My hands shook so hard I nearly dropped it. On the back of the photo, written in pen, were 4 words. We saw him too. That's when I knew. This wasn't just a child's nightmare. This wasn't just stress. There was something out there, something that left prints deeper than any human step. Something that circled houses like a predator learning the shape of its cage. Something that watched children through glass and waited for the lights to go out. And whatever it was, it had noticed me. Because that night, for the first time, I heard the tapping on my own window. 1, 2, 3. Then silence. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I just lay there staring at the glass, waiting for a shape to appear. It never did. But in the morning, when I finally worked up the courage to look, I saw them, in the mud just beneath my window. Footprints, larger than any man's. It had been a few weeks since the call about the little girl. The one who whispered to me about the tall man outside her window. I wanted to believe it was over, that whatever had frightened her that night was gone. Maybe just a trespasser, a stranger, something explainable, but deep down, I knew better. The shift was quiet that evening. Calls about car wrecks, drunks, noise complaints, things that felt almost comforting in their normality. My mind wasn't even on the girl anymore, until the line lit up with a number I didn't recognize. I answered the way I always did, calm, steady, and then I heard her voice. The mother, she didn't waste time with pleasantries. Her tone was tight, shaky, almost angry, but not at me. At the situation, she said the figure had come back. At first, she thought it was her imagination, a trick of the moonlight against the glass. But her daughter swore it was him, the tall man. And then, she said something that made my blood turn cold. He waved this time. I didn't know how to respond. I sat there with the receiver pressed to my ear, my heart thudding against my ribs. The mother said she didn't want to call the police again. Not after the first search, not after the officers came and left without answers. The footprints had been the only trace, and even those didn't feel right. She said they had tried closing the blinds, locking the windows, moving the girl into another room. Nothing helped. He always seemed to find her window again, and now he was waving. She asked me, almost begged me, to just stay on the line that night. To listen. To be there. I should have told her no. I should have reminded her that wasn't part of my job. But something inside me, some dark pull, kept me tethered to her. I agreed. I listened as the house creaked around them, as her daughter whimpered in the background, saying he was standing there again, staring in. I asked what he looked like. The mother hesitated, and then she whispered, "Too tall. His arms hang low, almost to his knees. And his head, I don't think it's shaped right." I thought of the footprints the officers had found. Too big to belong to any man, and for the first time, I realized, whatever this was, it wasn't human. The call lasted almost an hour. Nothing happened beyond that uneasy silence, broken only by the girl's soft crying. Eventually, the figure seemed to vanish again, slipping back into the night like he'd never been there, but when I hung up, I couldn't shake it. That image of something tall and wrong, standing in the dark, staring into the home of a child. I told myself I wouldn't hear from them again. That maybe this time it really was over. But the calls didn't stop. Every few nights, sometimes once a week, the mother would call back. Always the same tone. That low, restrained panic. Always the same story. The figure returned. Always outside. Always watching, sometimes closer, sometimes further, but never gone for long. The girl grew more unsettled with each call. I could hear it in her voice when she occasionally spoke into the phone. She said she could feel him watching, even when he wasn't at the window. She said she could hear him sometimes, too, scratching softly at the glass. The mother was unraveling. And I wasn't far behind, because here's the truth. Every time the mother called, every time I heard her voice trembling through the line, I began to feel like the watcher was watching me, too. I'd catch myself glancing toward the windows of the dispatch room, half expecting to see a tall shadow on the other side. I'd walk to my car after my shift, and for just a second, I'd swear there were footsteps behind me, longer, heavier. It's amazing how quickly fear spreads. It doesn't stay where it begins. It leaks into everything. One night, the call was different. The mother didn't whisper. She screamed. Her daughter was in hysterics, saying the man wasn't outside anymore. He was inside the yard, standing near the tree line, still too far to see clearly, but close enough that his features looked sharper, less like a shadow. The mother described it to me in real time, her words breaking as she watched. She said his body seemed stretched, his movements too slow, like he wasn't bending at the right places. And then she said something that will never leave me. He doesn't just wave anymore. He points. Her voice cracked when she said it, because he wasn't pointing at the window that night. He was pointing at the front door. I dispatched officers immediately. My voice betrayed me, though. I could hear how shaky I sounded over the radio. I didn't care. I needed someone else there. Someone real. Someone who could tell me I wasn't losing my mind. The officers arrived. They searched. They found nothing. No figure, no tracks this time. Just silence and wind and the frightened family. But the mother kept insisting, swearing, begging them to believe her. When they left, she stayed on the line with me. She whispered that she thought he was getting bolder, that he wasn't just watching anymore, that he was waiting. Waiting for what? I didn't want to ask. The next few nights blurred together. Sleep came in fragments. Every dark window felt dangerous. Every noise outside felt deliberate. And then, the last call. It was late, past 2 in the morning. The phone rang, and when I answered, there was silence on the other end. Just static. I almost hung up. But then I heard a small voice. "The girl," she said. He waved at me again. I swallowed hard and asked where her mom was. No answer. Just the faint sound of tapping, like fingers against glass. And then, barely above a whisper, the girl said, "He's not at the window anymore. He's behind me." The line went dead. I sat there, frozen. The silence in the room pressed down on me like a weight. We sent units. We searched. The house was empty. No mother, no child. Nothing but a half-drawn curtain swaying in the breeze of an open window. And sometimes, when I close my eyes at night, I swear I can still hear the faintest sound. That slow, steady tapping like fingers against glass. And I wonder if one night, when I least expect it, I'll see him too, waving at me through my own window. The thing about rookies is, they still believe the system always works. They trust the radio, the dispatch, the procedure. They think if you just follow the steps, everything turns out the way it should. But the system doesn't prepare you for places like that hospital. It was Eric, the new guy on patrol, the same one who'd told me about hearing a shift change through his headset. He still laughed it off back then, pretending it hadn't rattled him. But I could tell. His smile was always a second too late, his jokes a little too forced. When the call came in that night, I didn't think twice about assigning him. It wasn't even a real call, not by the book. Just another ghost transmission from the old hospital, but this time, it was different. The line lit up just past 1 a.m. A woman's voice again, this one sharper, more frantic than the others. She said someone was screaming in the east wing. She said the doors were locked and no one was answering her calls. I asked her name. She said Nurse Lillian. The way she said it sent a chill down my spine. Like she was reading it off a tag she hadn't worn in years. The audio cracked, filled with the echo of distant screams. Not shrill, panicked screams, just this low, endless wail like dozens of voices crying at once. and then it cut. Dead silence. I dispatched without thinking. Gave the location. The old hospital. East Wing, Eric was the closest unit. He didn't hesitate. Copy that. En route. The words felt too clean, too easy. I wanted to stop him. To pull the call, to tell him it wasn't worth it. But my mouth stayed shut. My training told me to send help. My gut told me not to. By the time I found the courage to key the mic again, he was already there. His voice came in steady at first. Dispatch, I'm on scene. Front gate is chained, but I found a way around. Moving in through the side, I froze. He wasn't supposed to go in. No one was. Not without backup. Not without clearance. I told him to wait, but he either didn't hear me or he ignored it. Copy, I'm inside now. East Wing. His breathing was loud over the radio. Too loud. Every sound echoed like he was in a cavern, not a hallway. Dispatch. Halls are empty. Floors covered in dust. Broken glass everywhere. Smells like mold. I wanted to cut the line. I wanted to pretend I hadn't heard, but I didn't. I just sat there, headset pressed so tight it hurt. He kept talking, narrating his steps like he thought it would keep him grounded. I see patient rooms. Beds still here. Sheets rotted through. Some of the doors are open, some are locked. There was a pause. Dispatch, I hear something. I held my breath. It's like voices. Down the hall. My stomach twisted. I wanted to scream at him to leave, but my throat was tight. He whispered now. They're calling for nurses. Over and over, it's just like you said. The radio cracked with static, like something heavy was pressing against the frequency. Then his voice again, quicker this time. I found the East Wing doors. They're chained shut. I can hear them on the other side. And then, dispatch. One of them just said my name. The blood drained from my face. I hadn't told him about that. About how one of the voices had said my name. The silence that followed was unbearable. Then came the sound of metal scraping, like the chain was being dragged, and his voice, shaking now. Doors are open. I don't know how, but they're open. I slammed my fist on the desk, shouting into the mic. Eric, don't go in. Do you hear me? Don't you dare go in! But he didn't answer. The next thing I heard was footsteps, slow, cautious, and then his voice, barely a whisper. Oh, God. Dispatch. There are beds in here. Dozens of them. People lying in them. They're... The transmission cut out for a second. When it came back, his voice was higher, frantic. They're moving! Their eyes are open, but they're not right. Their mouths... Static swallowed his words. Then a scream, raw, human, his. The line went dead. I sat there in shock. Headset still pressed against my ear, waiting for him to come back. Waiting for anything, but nothing came. We sent backup. Teams searched every inch of that building. They found his car outside the gate, still running. They found the side door forced open, his flashlight lying just inside. But no Eric. Not a trace. The beds he described weren't there either. Just rusted frames, rotting mattresses. No bodies, no patients. Nothing alive. The official report said he must have gotten lost, maybe fallen through a collapsed section of the floor. His body never recovered. Case still open, but I know better. I heard him. I heard the voices call his name, and I'll never forget the last sound before the line cut. The way his screams seemed to echo with theirs, blending into that low chorus of patients begging for help. Sometimes, when the room is quiet and the lines are dead, I swear I still hear it. His voice calling for me, like he's still inside, like he's never coming out. And the worst part? A small part of me thinks, he isn't alone in there. That maybe he's become one of them. You don't get into this job expecting silence. The phones ring, the radios chatter, the hum of voices never really stops. But that night, there was nothing, no calls, no chatter, not even static. Just this dead air pressing in on me, so heavy it made me feel like I was sitting at the bottom of the ocean. I thought maybe the system had gone down, but the lights on the console still glowed, green and steady. Everything was alive. Everything was working, except me. I couldn't shake the sound of Eric's last scream. It looped in my head like it hadn't ended, like maybe it was still going on. Somewhere I couldn't reach. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw him walking through those rotted halls. flashlight beam trembling, dust swirling in the air like smoke, and behind him, in the dark, all those beds, all those eyes. I tried to distract myself, shuffling reports, double-checking logs, but the silence was too thick. My own heartbeat was louder than anything else in the room. Then the phone rang. I nearly jumped out of my chair. My hands fumbled for the receiver. "Woven, what's your emergency?" "Static? No, not static. Breathing. Slow, shallow breaths. Right against the line. Hello?" My voice cracked. "Is anyone there?" The breathing stopped, and then soft, almost a whisper. "Operator." It was my title, not my name. But the way it was said, like someone had been waiting to say it for a very long time, I froze. My tongue stuck to the roof of my mouth. The voice continued, weak and tired, but clear. "Why didn't you send help?" The room tilted. My throat closed. It wasn't Eric's voice. It wasn't a stranger's either. It was older, hollow, like it had been pulled up from a grave. I whispered into the receiver. "Who is this?" No answer. Just a long sigh, the kind someone gives when they know they've been abandoned. Then another voice broke through, layered right on top of the first. "Nurse? Please, please, I need a nurse." And another. "Help me." And another. "Don't leave us." My hand trembled so badly I almost dropped the phone. The voices piled on top of each other, building and building until it felt like I was standing in the middle of a ward with every bed full. Their cries weren't sharp. They weren't desperate. They were tired, endless, like they'd been asking the same thing for decades. And then, woven into the mess, I heard it. "Eric. Dispatch." His voice cracked, just like it had over the radio. "Dispatch?" "I can't see the door anymore." I couldn't breathe. The call ended with a sharp click, like someone had hung up. Silence again. But it didn't feel empty anymore. It felt crowded. I pushed back from the console, my chair scraping the floor. The walls seemed closer, the air thicker. I could still hear the voices echoing, not from the line, but from somewhere behind me. I turned, fast. Nothing. Just the dim glow of monitors, the quiet hum of machines. I told myself I was tired, that I'd been working too many shifts, that grief and guilt were playing tricks on me. But when the phone rang again, I knew I wouldn't be able to ignore it. The same line, same shrill ring. My hand hovered over the receiver. My chest ached. I picked it up, whispering into the dark. "Eric?" For a moment, nothing. And then a sound I'll never forget. Someone humming, soft, gentle, almost like a lullaby. It was a tune I recognized. My grandmother used to hum it when I was a kid, tucking me into bed, but hearing it there, through that line, at 1 in the morning, it twisted something deep in my stomach. The humming grew louder, closer, until it drowned out my own thoughts. And then, as sudden as it had started, it cut off. This time, the voice that followed was different. Flat. Cold. "We see you." My blood turned to ice. I slammed the receiver down and backed away from the console. My whole body shook, but the phone rang again. And again. Each ring sharp enough to rattle the glass in the window. I didn't answer. I couldn't. The sound built until it felt like the entire room was vibrating. I pressed my hands to my ears, but it didn't stop. And then, all at once, silence. I lowered my hands. Every line on the console was lit up. Every single one. I'd never seen that before. Not even during disasters, and each light pulsed in perfect rhythm, like a heartbeat. I couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. I just stood there staring while the faintest whisper slid through the speakers. "Operator," they all said it, together, in unison. "Operator." The sound swelled, filling the room, pressing against my skull. I stumbled back, my knees buckling, and in that moment, I swear I saw them. Not on the screen, not in the room, but just outside, behind the glass of the observation window. Rows of pale faces pressed close, their mouths moving in sync with the word "operator, operator." I squeezed my eyes shut. When I opened them again, the window was empty. The lights on the console were dark. The room was still, like nothing had happened. But I know it did. I still hear them sometimes when the room goes quiet, calling for nurses who aren't there, asking for help that never comes. and every so often, between their cries, I hear him, Eric, begging me not to hang up, and I don't know what terrifies me more. That the voices will stop one day, or that they never will. They told me to take some time off. The official line was mandatory leave. That's what they say when they don't have the words for something else. Everyone had seen it happen. The rookie officer going in. The silence after. The way the radio picked up my voice even though I hadn't spoken. They tried to make sense of it. Technical glitch, crossed wires, stress. But nobody believed it. Not really. And me? I didn't fight it. I packed up my things, signed the paperwork, and walked out of that room like I hadn't left a piece of myself behind. But I had. The headset. The one I'd been wearing the night Eric disappeared. They told me later it kept transmitting. Even when it was powered down. Even when it wasn't plugged into anything. Hours of sound, recorded and stored. Not Eric. Not the patients. Me. My voice screaming. Except I don't remember screaming. Not once. I remember listening. I remember answering. I remember the silence. But I never screamed. Still, the recordings played it back on loop. My voice torn apart, raw, endless. At first I thought maybe someone had tampered with the files. Maybe it was a cruel prank. Some dark joke in a department that had seen too much. But then they showed me. They played it in front of me, and it was me. Not just the sound of it. The rhythm. The words that slipped through between the screams. Things I've said before. Old memories. Whispers I'd made to myself when I thought no one was listening. But they were. Something was. I left the building, but I didn't leave it behind. At night, in bed, I swore I could hear it. Not through the headset anymore, but in the ringing of my phone. The first time, I thought it was a wrong number. My cell lit up around 2 in the morning. Unknown caller. I answered with that heavy, half-asleep voice, expecting silence or some drunk dialing the wrong line. But I heard it immediately. Myself. My own voice crying out. Not from memory. Not from the headset. From the phone pressed against my ear. I dropped it. It clattered across the floor, but the sound didn't stop. My voice kept pouring out, desperate and jagged, until the call ended with a sharp click. When I picked it up again, the screen was blank. No missed call. No record of it happening at all. That's when I knew it had followed me home. The next night it rang again. Same number. Same sound, only this time I didn't drop it. I listened, and in between the screams, my screams, I heard other voices, whispering under mine. Layered so low it felt like they were breathing directly into my ear. Stay with us. Don't hang up. Operator, that last one cut through sharp. The same word that had haunted me since the beginning. I shut the phone off. Took out the battery. Left it on the counter like it was a weapon I didn't know how to unload, but that didn't matter. Because after that, I didn't need the phone to hear them. Sometimes it was in the pipes, carrying through the walls of my apartment like water rushing where no water should be. Sometimes it was in the hum of the fridge, words buried in the static. Sometimes I swear it was in my own breath, and always it circled back to me. My own voice, broken down into pieces I didn't recognize, stitched together into something that no longer belonged to me. I stopped answering the phone altogether. Stopped checking messages. My friends thought I'd gone dark, but I couldn't explain it. How do you tell someone your own voice is stalking you? The nightmares didn't help. Every time I closed my eyes, I was back in that hospital. The air smelled of mold and bleach, and the hallways stretched on forever. I walked past rooms filled with beds, filled with figures that turned their heads in unison as I passed. And from every bed, the same sound. Screams. My screams. I'd wake up shaking, drenched in sweat. And for a moment, I wouldn't know if I was awake at all, because the sound wouldn't stop when I opened my eyes. It would still be there, looping, growing, like the walls of my apartment were thin skin stretched over a wound that hadn't healed in decades. One night, I thought I heard someone at my door. I got up, heart pounding, and pressed my ear to the wood. Nothing at first. Then faintly, a voice, my own, whispering, "Let me in." I staggered back, hand shaking on the lock, fighting the urge to open it. fighting the pull of hearing myself, begging. The knock came next, gentle, rhythmic. The way you'd knock if you didn't want to wake a sleeping child, but I live alone. Don't remember the next part clearly, only that I woke up the next morning, the door wide open, cold air spilling in. My phone sat on the floor just inside the threshold. Battery back in, screen lit, one new voicemail. I don't remember listening to it, but I must have, because even now I can hear it word for word. It was my voice again. Only this time it wasn't screaming, it was calm, clear, don't fight it. You're already here. I don't know what that means, but sometimes I think I do, because lately, when I look in the mirror, I don't quite recognize what I see. My lips move a second too late. My eyes blink at the wrong time, like I'm a bad recording of myself, played on a loop. And in the quiet, in those late hours of the night when the phone stays dark, I realize the truth that chills me more than anything. The screams never belonged to the hospital. They never belonged to Eric. They belong to me, and I'm not sure how much longer I can keep them in. I used to believe I was just a witness to all of this. The strange calls, the impossible voices, the places that shouldn't exist. None of it was about me. I was just the one picking up the phone, the operator. The middleman, that belief. It kept me sane. It made it easier to walk into the building at night, to slide on the headset, and remind myself I was only the echo chamber. Nothing more. But then the calls started asking for me. It was late, like always. The night shift. That quiet stretch of hours where the world feels thinner, like something is pressing in against it from the other side. The lines had been dead most of the night, just the hum of the consoles and the glow of monitors keeping me company. I was sipping coffee that had gone bitter and cold when one of the lines lit up. I answered the way I always do. 911, what's your emergency? There was nothing at first, just static, thick and heavy, like the sound of an untuned radio. Then I heard it, a voice, soft, familiar, in a way I couldn't place. Is this the operator? Something about the way they said it made my skin prickle. Yes, this is dispatch. What's your emergency? The pause that followed dragged on too long. I almost thought the line had dropped. Then, I want to speak to you. By name, I froze. I hadn't given it. Not once, we never do. We don't offer names, we don't get personal. It's policy, it's safety. And yet, the voice whispered it. My name, clear, perfect. As if they'd been practicing it. Every part of me went cold. My throat tightened, but I forced myself to answer. I don't know who you are or how you know that. What's your emergency? The voice laughed. Not loud, not manic. Just a soft chuckle like someone humoring a child. You're the emergency. I swear my heart stopped beating for a moment. The line filled with static again, sharp enough to sting my ears. I pulled the headset off, staring at the board like it had betrayed me. But the line was still active. The call hadn't ended. I put the headset back on, just enough to listen. The voice had changed. Lower now. Closer. Like it wasn't coming through wires anymore. Like it was bleeding through the air around me. I've been calling for so long, but you never answered. Until now. My hand hovered over the disconnect key, but I couldn't bring myself to press it. Something about the tone, gentle, almost pleading, held me there. What do you want from me? I whispered. Silence. Then softly, to remind you, the line cut. No number, no trace. Nothing left behind but the sound of my own breathing, ragged in the empty room. I told myself it was a prank. It had to be. Somehow, someone found my name and decided to use it to mess with me. Maybe it was one of the guys from the other shift. Maybe it was someone who had heard rumors, but deep down, I knew better. Because the way they said my name, it wasn't casual. It wasn't tossed out like a guess. It was exact, personal, like they'd known it longer than I had. The next night, I almost didn't go in. I sat in my car in the parking lot, staring at the building, at the glow of the windows. Every bone in my body told me not to step inside, to quit, to walk away and never look back. But where would I go? What would I do? The calls. They weren't just tied to this place anymore. They were tied to me, and I couldn't shake the feeling that running wouldn't save me. So I walked in. I sat down. I put the headset back on. The first few hours were normal. A domestic dispute, a drunk driver, things I could handle, things that felt solid, real. And then, just past 3 in the morning, the line lit again. I answered. My voice shook despite myself. 911, what's your emergency? And there it was, the same voice, whispering, hello, operator. I closed my eyes, gripping the edge of the console. Who are you? You know me, the voice replied. I don't, I said, sharper than I meant to. You've heard me before, I thought back. The hospital, the hollow town, the little girl. The voices layered in static, calling for nurses, calling for help. I had heard so many voices. They blurred together sometimes. But this one, it was different. It had weight, presence, like it was stitched into every call I'd ever taken. Why are you calling me? I asked. The voice didn't hesitate. Because it's your turn. The line hissed, cracked, then went dead. I ripped the headset off and slammed the disconnect, but my hands wouldn't stop shaking. Your turn. The words rang in my skull over and over. I couldn't sit still. I paced the room, every shadow suddenly alive, every flicker of the monitor too sharp. I felt watched, not by cameras, not by co-workers, but by something else. Something old. Something patient. The rest of the shift crawled by. No more calls. Just me. The hum of the equipment, and the echo of that voice in my head. When dawn finally came, I stumbled out into the parking lot, exhausted, trembling. The sunlight felt wrong. Too bright. Too fake. I unlocked my car, slid into the seat, and froze. My phone was on the dashboard. Screen lit. One missed call. Unknown number. Time 3:33 a.m. The exact moment the voice said, "It's your turn." I didn't answer it. I couldn't. But I knew, even as I sat there staring at it, that it wasn't going to stop. The calls weren't random anymore. They weren't stories I was recording from the outside. They'd crossed over, and now they were about me. The worst part of the graveyard shift isn't the silence. It isn't the empty streets outside or the fluorescent lights that hum like dying insects overhead. It's the waiting. Sitting there, headset on, screens glowing in the dark, not knowing what's going to bleed through the line next. That's the part that breaks you. After the call that spoke my name, I couldn't relax anymore. Every time the line lit up, my chest tightened, like I was bracing for someone to reach through the wires and grab me. But a week passed, and nothing happened. Just the usual emergencies, fires, car crashes, arguments that got out of control, things I could handle, things that felt normal. And slowly I almost convinced myself it had been some kind of elaborate prank. Maybe a hacker. Maybe a coworker screwing with me. I wanted to believe that. God, I needed to. Then I opened the logs. It was the end of my shift, almost dawn. My supervisor had left early and the place was dead quiet. Out of habit, I pulled up the digital call records. We have to keep track of them, make sure every incident is filed correctly. The screen filled with lines of text, dates, times, caller IDs. At first, it looked normal. But then I noticed something. There were entries under my operator ID, ones I didn't remember taking, dozens of them, all logged between 2 and 4 in the morning. I leaned closer, scrolling down, heart pounding. Every entry had the same note under call type. It said, mirror room. I blinked at the words, trying to process them. That wasn't a code we used. I'd never seen it before, and yet there it was. Over and over, mirror room, mirror room, mirror room. I clicked one of the entries, expecting an audio file, but the box was empty. Just silence, no recording, no transcript. It didn't make sense. Calls are always recorded. Always, unless the system didn't want me to hear them. I checked another entry. Same thing, and another. Still nothing. My palms were sweating. My mouth felt dry. I kept scrolling, desperate for something, anything that would explain it, and then I saw it. One entry had a transcript attached. Just one. I clicked it, and the screen filled with text. At first, it looked like nonsense. Fragments of sentences, broken words, gaps filled with static markers. But buried in the noise, there was something else, a phrase. repeated again and again. Look behind you. I sat frozen, staring at the words. The air in the room felt heavier. I told myself not to. I told myself it was just text on a screen. Just data! But my body betrayed me. Slowly, against every screaming instinct, I turned in my chair. The room was empty, just the rows of desks. The glow of monitors, and yet, for a second, I swore I saw movement. A shadow slipping just out of view. I snapped back to the screen, hands shaking. I closed the log, shut everything down, and left before my shift was even over. I told myself I wouldn't come back. But I did. Because some part of me needed to know. The next night, I sat at my station staring at the board. I didn't even bother pretending to work. My eyes kept flicking to the logs, to the word burned into my mind. Mirror room. Finally, around 3 in the morning, I opened the entries again, and this time there were more. 3 new calls. All logged under my ID, all marked with the same phrase. I hadn't taken them. I hadn't even noticed the lines ringing. My hands trembled as I clicked the latest one. No transcript, just audio. I pressed play. At first, it was the usual static. Then, faintly, I heard breathing. My breathing. It matched the rhythm of my chest. Too perfect, too exact. And then, layered under it, a voice, mine, whispering. Can you see me now? I tore the headset off, heart hammering. But the recording kept playing through the speakers, my own voice spilling into the empty room. Can you see me now? The words grew louder, sharper. I slammed the stop button, but it didn't work. The playback bar kept moving. The voice kept echoing. Can you see me now? Over and over until the words melted into a sound that wasn't human anymore. I yanked the power cord from the console. The screen went black. The room fell silent. And in that silence, I heard something else. A whisper. Not from the speakers. From the room itself. Look. I turned slowly, stomach twisted into knots. And that's when I saw it. Across the room, one of the darkened monitors had come back on. But it wasn't showing data. It wasn't showing logs. It was showing me. My own reflection. Except not. Because the figure on the screen wasn't moving the way I was. When I raised my hand, it stayed still. When I leaned closer, it leaned back. And then, with a slow, deliberate motion, it smiled. A smile I didn't make. I stumbled back, chair clattering to the floor. The screen flickered. The image twisted. And for just a moment, I wasn't looking at a reflection at all. I was looking through a window. And something on the other side was looking back. The screen went black. I stood there shaking, barely able to breathe. I should have run. I should have quit. But I couldn't. Because the truth was sinking in now. The logs weren't errors. They weren't pranks. They were records of something I wasn't supposed to remember, something I had already been part of. The mirror room, and whatever it was keeping score. I always thought the worst sound I could hear on the job was silence. That dead air. After a desperate scream, when you know someone just stopped existing on the other end. But I was wrong. The worst sound is hearing yourself, and not remembering when you made the sound. It started a few days after the logs, after the mirror room. I tried to push it out of my head, tried to tell myself it was exhaustion, maybe even hallucinations from too much caffeine and too little sleep. But the system wouldn't let me forget, because that night, at exactly 3:07 in the morning, my headset came alive. No incoming call, no flashing light, just sound. At first, I thought it was static, a feedback glitch. But the longer I listened, the clearer it became. It was me. My voice, screaming. I froze, every hair on my body standing on end. The headset pressed against my ear, filling my skull with a noise I knew down to my bones, but couldn't place. Because I'd never made that sound before. Not at work. Not anywhere. It wasn't just a cry of pain. It wasn't shock. It was raw terror. The kind that rips through your throat when something has you cornered, when you know you aren't getting out. I tore the headset off, shaking. But the sound didn't stop. It was still coming through the speakers, my screams echoing, looping one after another with no break, no breath, like someone had recorded me and was hitting play over and over again. I tried shutting down the console, but the buttons didn't respond. I unplugged the entire unit, but the sound didn't cut. It was still there, bleeding into the room, filling the empty air with the noise of my own collapse. I covered my ears, but it didn't help. It was like the sound was inside me, vibrating through my chest, rattling my teeth. And then I heard something else, underneath the screams. A voice, soft, calm, whispering between each loop. You'll remember soon. I don't remember leaving that night. I just remember sitting in my car, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white, trying to catch my breath. I told myself I wouldn't go back. But of course I did. Because what else was I supposed to do? Pretend it wasn't happening? Pretend I hadn't heard my own death replaying through the wires? The next night, I came in early. The building was. Still, the air stale, like the walls themselves hadn't moved in years. I sat at my console, staring at the headset, daring it to come alive. Hours passed. Nothing. For a moment, I thought maybe it had been a one-time glitch. Maybe my mind really was breaking. Then, at exactly 3:07 again, the line clicked. This time, there was no screaming, just breathing. My breathing. Slow. Shallow. Coming from the headset, perfectly in sync with the rise and fall of my own chest. It was like listening to an echo of myself, half a second behind. I sat frozen, too scared to move, afraid that if I did, the sound would change. And it did. The breathing stopped. And then, in my own voice, the whisper came. "Help me." I ripped the headset off and threw it across the desk. It clattered to the floor, the voice still bleeding from the tiny speaker, begging me over and over. Help me. But I couldn't move. Because in that moment I realized what I was hearing. It wasn't just some recording, it wasn't a prank. It was me. Not me here, not me now, but me from somewhere else. Somewhere I hadn't reached yet. Somewhere I didn't want to go. The system was playing back my future, and whatever it was showing me, I didn't survive it. I don't remember sleeping after that. I don't even remember going home. But I remember the next night. Because that's when the voices followed me. Not at work, not in the console, in my own apartment. It started with the phone on my nightstand. I woke to it buzzing, the red glow of the screen lighting up the dark, unknown number. My stomach dropped. I shouldn't have answered. But I did. And on the other end, I heard it. The same loop of screams. My screams. Playing back through my personal phone, clear as day. I dropped the device, but the sound didn't stop. It filled the room, bouncing off the walls, building and building until it felt like the air itself was cracking. And then, just like before, the whisper slid through. "You're almost there." I don't know why I didn't leave. Why I didn't burn the phone, the console, everything, and run until my lungs gave out. Maybe I was already trapped. Maybe I was already too far in. The next shift was my last. I think I knew it when I walked through the door. The room smelled like dust and ozone, like the space between lightning and thunder. I sat at my station, headset in hand, and waited. 7 came. The line clicked, and this time, it wasn't just screams. It was everything. My voice, my breath, my whispers, all layered together, twisted into a chorus of myself, crying, begging, screaming, and underneath it all, the calm voice. Not mine. Not this time, but something else. Repeating one phrase over and over, until the words drilled into my skull. This is the final transmission. I tried to pull the headset off, but it wouldn't budge. The cord felt alive, tightening against my skin, holding me there. The screens around me flickered on, one by one, filling with static. And in the static, faces formed. My face. Hundreds of versions of me, all screaming silently, their mouths stretched wide, their eyes black. I thrashed, clawing at the wires, but the voice only grew louder. This is the final transmission. And for one last moment, before the darkness took me, I understood. The calls, the logs, the voices, they weren't warnings, they were echoes. Fragments of me that had already been pulled through, looped back and replayed like old tapes. I wasn't hearing the future. I was hearing the end. My end. And when the headset finally went quiet, the only thing left in the room was the sound of my own screams. Still looping. Still playing, long after I was gone.